Shabbat
While
Shalom,
there's, oh, sorry.
everyone. Welcome to SightedMoon.com. I'm Stuart Wilson, one of the hosts for this service. Today is April 19, 2025 on the Gregorian calendar in North America at this time. It is the 20th day of the second month, according to the new moon sighting in Israel on Sunday evening, March 30th, and according to the state of the barley sighted in February by members of the Sighted Moon team. We have seen reports of the barley shattering and being cut in mid-March when we observed wave sheaf day. And so it is our 35th day of the Omer count. We are in the second year of the fifth sabbatical cycle of the red heifer, famine, captivity, and the two witnesses in the 120th Jubilee cycle. Joseph Dumond is in the Philippines teaching about Jehovah's timelines and calendar, the Shabbats, the feasts, the sabbatical cycles, and Jehovah's prophecy for the coming years. Welcome to our recorded Shabbat service. Thank you for joining us. We started our service earlier today, so I thank Shane for welcoming the family today and sounding the shofar. We have worshiped in song led by Shauna. We have approached Jehovah in prayer led by Rose, and we have heard the Aaronic blessing. If you are seeing this during the week on video, we invite you to come join us live on Saturdays at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Savings Time in North America. Coordinates are in our weekly newsletter, so please subscribe at sightedmoon.com. And so we have somebody who will start us off by praying. Oh, Ella has the opening prayer today.
Thank you, Stuart. Jehovah, Father, creator of all things, it's a great, glorious, beautiful day here in Kentucky. And I thank you that you've brought us to your special day, the day of rest that you've given to each one of us. I thank you that we can gather together with family from Sighted Moon all around the world, and then we can practice shalom as we midrash, as we study your word. Give us ears to hear, Father. Open our understanding and our desire to know the truth. Help us to be able to listen intently and to have midrash that gives us new points, gives us understanding. Thank you. I thank you, Father, that if we allow you, that you're with us every step of the way. Father, whatever trials we go through, you're there. Whatever heartaches, whatever joys, whatever victories, Father, you're there. If we allow you to help us to bear burdens and to rejoice with us in our victories. And Father, when we do have times of excitement and goodness and pleasure and things that you allow to come our way, I ask that you keep us grounded in shalom and peace and love for one another. When we're down, when we feel defeated, I ask that you lift each one of us up. Whatever heartaches we bear, whatever sorrows we bear, whatever disappointments, Father, be in our midst and help us to feel your presence and know we can lean upon you. Thank you for each one that's here today, Father. Help them to rejoice in understanding and in your love that's here. I ask for Joe as he is burning with passion to get the message to the world that you have given him, how short the time is before you come and establish a new millennium. Father, I ask that you give him wisdom. I ask you give the people, Ike, and those who are planning venues for him, places for him to go and speak. Some travel long distances, much all night sometimes. Father, help them to be wise and realizing that Joe's human. He needs rest. He needs proper food to eat. Help them to understand that and help Joe to use wisdom in what he does, Father. Just give him peace. Give him health as he's there. Help them to figure out what it is that he needs and give him that rest as much as anything. He's willing to run, Father. He's willing to burn at both ends. He's willing to give every ounce of any energy that he has, but he needs your strength to do that. And I'm asking that you overpower him today, overshadow him with such shalom that again he knows beyond a shadow of a doubt he's doing what you've called him to do. Touch him right now, Father, healing from whatever the food poisoning, whatever's upset in his body. Right now, Father, just touch him and let him know that he's healed. Thank you for our word today. Be with us all. Help us to understand, enlighten our eyes and understanding with your Torah. In Yeshua's name, amen.
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 Amen. Thank you, Ella. Okay, so it's time for our Torah readings. At Sighted Moon, we read through the Bible twice each sabbatical cycle, and our Torah readings today are Exodus 15, Isaiah chapters 4 through 7. We'll be reading Psalm 121, and our portion from John is John 4, verses 43 through to chapter 5, verse 29. Here at SightedMoon.com, we read a selection and then we invite discussion, otherwise known as Midrash, before we move on to the next selection. May we all be blessed by our fellowship today, Jehovah's Word and His presence, and Shalom today. Shane, would you please recite the blessing over our Torah reading and readers?
You bet. He who blessed our forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Tom, Deb, Glenn, Shauna, Gabrielle, and Sombra, because they have come up to raise the Torah, and because they shall re-roll the Torah. As a reward for this, may the Holy One, blessed is He, protect them and rescue them from every trouble and distress, from every plague and illness, and may He send blessing and success in their every endeavor. Together with all Israel, their brethren, now let us respond. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Shane. And so remember, we're reading Exodus 15, and last week, Israel crossed the Red Sea. Okay, and so we're going to end. Egypt was drowned. The army of Egypt was drowned behind them. Okay, so we have Tom's going to read Exodus 15 for us.
Okay, thank you, Stuart. I'm going to read from what's called the Concordant Literal Version. I hope you all don't mind. It's very literal. I found it very helpful in my studies to help, put up little flags where I should check the Hebrew, where it deviates from the most English translations. So here we go. Then Moshe and the sons of Israel sing this song to Jehovah and spoke, saying, "Let me sing to Jehovah, for he is august, yea, august. The horse and its rider he heaved into the sea. Yah is my strength and my melody, and he became mine for salvation. This is my El, I shall adorn him. Elohim of my father, I shall exalt him. Jehovah is a man of war. Jehovah is his name. The chariots of Pharaoh and his army he shot into the sea, and the choice of his third fighters sank into the sea of weeds. Abysses covered them. They descended into shadowy depths as a stone. Your right hand, Jehovah, has ennobled in vigor. Your right hand, Jehovah, was harrying the enemy. And by the vastness of your pomp, you were demolishing those rising against you. You were sending forth your heat. It was devouring them as straw. And by the wind of your anger, the floods were denuded. The floods were stood up as a waterspout. The abysses were curdled in the heart of the sea. The enemy said, I shall pursue, I shall overtake, I shall apportion the loot. My soul's desire shall be fulfilled on them. I shall unsheath my sword, my hand shall evict them. You made a breeze with your wind, the sea covered them. They submerged as lead in the noble waters. Who is like you among the Elam, Jehovah? Who is like you, ennobled in holiness? Fear-inspiring in praiseworthy deeds, working marvels. You stretched out your right hand, the earth swallowed them up. You guided in your kindness, this people you have redeemed. You will conduct them by your strength to your holy homestead. The peoples have heard, they are disturbed. Travail, it has taken hold of the dwellers of Philistia. Then the sheiks of Edom are flustered. The arbiters of Moab, quivering, took hold of them. All the dwellers of Canaan are dissolved. Dread and awe are falling on them. By the greatness of your arm, they are still as a stone. Until your people are passing by, Jehovah, until this people whom you have acquired are passing by. You shall bring them in and plant them in the mount of your allotment, the site of your dwelling, which you have contrived, Jehovah, the sanctuary, Adonai, which your hands have established. Jehovah, he shall reign for the eon and further. When the horses of Pharaoh had entered with the chariots and with his horsemen into the sea, then Jehovah returned the waters of the sea over them. Yet the sons of Israel, they had gone on dry ground in the midst of the sea. Then Miriam, the prophetess, the sister of Aaron, took the tambourine in her hand, and all the women went forth with her with tambourines and with choruses. And Miriam responded to them, Sing to Jehovah, for he is august, yea, august. The horse and its rider he heaved into the sea. Now Moshe caused Israel to journey from the sea of weeds. So they went forth to the wilderness of Shur, and went 3 days into the wilderness, but they found no waters. When they came to Marah, they were unable to drink the waters of Marah, for they were bitter. Therefore one called its name Marah. Then the people grumbled against Moshe, saying, What shall we drink? So he cried out to Jehovah, and Jehovah directed him to a tree, and he flung it into the waters, and the waters were sweet. There he made for them a statute and a judgment, and there he probed them. For he said, If you shall hearken, yea, hearken to the voice of Jehovah your Elohim, and do what is upright in his eyes, and give ear to his instructions, and observe all his statutes, and all the illnesses which I placed on the Egyptians I shall not place on you, for I am Jehovah your healer. Then they came to Elim. There were 12 springs of water, and 70 palms there. So they encamped there by the waters.
Thank you, Tom.
So be it.
Thank you. So now we enter into Midrash. Does anybody have any commentary they'd like to give? Something that is particularly of interest to them? What comes to mind?
I have a quick question.
Shane.
Tom, in your version 15.1, did you say August or something like that? He has. I was seeing for he has. It's like a
Yes,
different word.
August. Yes.
August. Okay. I thought I heard that right, but interesting.
What does that mean?
Yeah, I'm not really sure what it means. But what I do know is every time I go to the Hebrew and double check it, I find that it's more literal than what most translations show.
Read that again. Read one again.
Yeah.
Is that where we found it?
Okay, sure, yeah. Then Moshe and the sons of Israel sing this song, which I should point out too while I got it. If you notice, that's written in the imperfect tense, right? It's written. It's actually qual imperfect, third person masculine singular. It's actually saying then. It's like speaking into the future. Then Moshe and the sons of Israel sing this song to Jehovah and spoke, saying, Let me sing to Jehovah, for he is august, yea, august. The horse and its rider he heaved into the sea. And if you notice, it doubles it, just like in the Hebrew, to show the emphasis.
The New King James uses the terms for he has triumphed gloriously.
Yeah, but in the Hebrew, it's Ga.
Right.
To rise
So
up.
August kind of saying it's really perfect. It's the best. Isn't that kind of the use of August? If they did a play in an august way or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm not authority.
in mine it says, for he is highly exalted.
Yeah.
The definition for the word august is respected and impressive.
Yeah.
Exalted would cover that, yes.
Yeah, one of this translation tries. There are a lot more English words in our vocabulary than there are in the Hebrew Torah, right? The Hebrew language doesn't have near as many words as English, so they have made in their translation, they as much as possible, never use the same English word for two different Hebrew words. For every Hebrew word, they may have more than one English word, but they'll never have more than one. I gotta get this right. They never use, for every Hebrew word, that they may have more than one English word. No,
No.
that's, I got that wrong. I'm saying it backwards, aren't I? I'd have to, but basically, they try to, if they come across a new Hebrew word, they find a new English word. They don't use one that they've used on other Hebrew words, and it's like I say, I have found it very helpful in my studies because it throws up flags where I got to go check the Hebrew, see what it actually says. Why are they using this term here? Why are they using that term there? And like I said, I have found it very helpful in my studies. It's called the Concordant Literal Version, and the online, the eSword version's not quite like the written version. The written version has all these little footnotes and shows where the Aramaic says this and the Syriac text says that, and the Septuagint might say this. They show all these different variants and stuff. It's very helpful. It has been to me anyway. So.
Thank you, Tom. Yes, we recognize that it's hard to translate words, and we get close approximations, which is why we usually have several different words offered up.
Yeah, but a good example though, like just say like the word stranger. You realize how many different Hebrew words are translated stranger, like in the King James Version? You have ger, which means a sojourner. You have toshav, which means a dweller. You have zur, which is referring to lineage. It's and all these different words are translated stranger. Nekar is referring to a foreigner, and all of these different Hebrew words can be translated stranger, whereas they will only translate nekar, foreigner. Ger is always sojourner. You see what I'm saying? And it helps you distinguish what is actually in the Hebrew text.
Right. Thank you, Tom. Wonderful.
You're welcome.
Sombra.
I was struck by verse 3, which says, Jehovah is a man of war. And it specifically says, Ish, man. And there is a strong argument against Jehovah being a man in Jewish tradition. And yet here it specifically says that Jehovah is a man of war. And one of the reasons why the Jews specifically vehemently speak against God being a man is they don't recognize Yeshua, a man, being Jehovah. But we also know that when Yeshua returns, he's not coming back as a suffering servant. He's coming back as a man of war. And anyhow, that phrase really struck me.
Mm-hmm. Angela.
Going back to Tom sharing this word, August, there is a person in history, Caesar Augustus, that chose to use that title. And prior to his changing his name to Caesar Augustus, he was Octavian, Julius Caesar's nephew. But it was after he had stepped out of what was normally considered Rome and became imperial, when Rome became empire, when he went forth and conquered. Then he gives himself God status and actually demands that he is worshipped, becoming a part of the Roman pantheon of gods, he elevates himself to a godhead and assumes this title because he was a man of war and he went forth and conquered, and he was expanding the Roman Empire now. So this Tom's enlightening us to what triumphing gloriously is like Augustus, and it's a good lesson. I enjoyed that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying it because I'm a math person. Grammar's never been my strong suit.
I don't know. You were talking about perfect tenses there. I was quite impressed.
Well, that's only because someone pointed it out to me.
Ella.
I think there was some discussion last week. Did Pharaoh actually drown in this? And as you read that, Pharaoh's chariots and his hosts, also all his chosen captains, but it doesn't specifically say that Pharaoh drowned. At first, I was thinking it was Pharaoh's chariot, but it's those chariots that he owned that were all out there with all of his hosts. But, the question still could remain, did he actually drown in that? I think he did, but I don't know.
Shane, did you want to comment on that? Or something new?
No,
Okay. Does anybody have
I don't know.
Okay. Does anybody have a comment on Ella's question?
I do. Yes, I do actually. Many you see it in movies and stuff. You see it many times. You leave a survivor behind to go and tell what happened. To recount to Pharaoh shirked back to Egypt, but I would imagine. And the idea of leaving a survivor to because if everybody's killed, then nobody knows what happened, right? Except for the winners, right? So I think it wouldn't surprise me if the Pharaoh was left alive.
In one sense, there would have been no need for him to proceed across after them at that point because he had all of his hosts to go and bring them back if they had made it. And I kind of agree with Tom, maybe he had a little second doubt about it when he got there. I don't know. I would have probably.
And there's also like David, one of the things that made David special, he was out in front of the army, right? That he was, that's how a real leader leads. Nowadays the generals are behind.
Yeah, he's never mentioned again that I know of in the scripture. That Pharaoh.
Gabrielle, did you want to comment on that? Paul might also want to comment on that.
Yes. If people go to YouTube and see Joel, Joel Kramer, Kramer, he's a biblical archaeologist, and he explains from his view that he found the Pharaoh that did not drown in the Red Sea, and he goes into why. So that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Gabrielle. Paul, did you want to comment on that?
In the book of Joshua, which we don't often talk about, it states that Pharaoh was a very small-statured man in that particular Pharaoh, and he had to sit up on the horse to be made higher than everybody else. But the book says that he then went and became a king of a country in the north, like up in Assyria somewhere. I'm not sure whether that's true or not. That's just the statement that was made at that time. But the thing is, there was no more comment in history that this man lived. That's the other part.
Thank you, Paul. Shane.
Well, I was going to bring up 15:8. we talked a little bit briefly about it last week, but about the floods and the upright. And this word, the depths were curdled. So if anybody's
Shield.
bringing that up as far as, I mean, it shows in there is what the word is congealed in the King James, and it's kafah, and it could mean frozen water. So it could be proof that that was the frozen walls. So I just want to touch on that again because we brought it up a little bit last week. So
Thank you, Shane.
I got something a little different there. It says, "In the wind of your nostrils, the waters were heaped up. The flood stood like a wall. The depths became stiff in the heart of the sea." That's just verse 8. So it's starting to look like, from the breath of God's nostrils, the sea was stood up, but the wind blew it apart, but the sea stood up. So it has to be some sort of frozen. Well, we have seen frozen things happening around the country where trees have been frozen, they just fall apart, crumble under their own weight. I'm sure if he can do it to trees and stuff in our day and age, he can do it back then, make it stand up.
Yes, and people in Canada and in the far, far north know what a very, very cold blast feels like. Sombra, do you have a comment?
Actually, I was going to mention verse 8 as well, because it says, "The winds of your off," APH, off. So, off, pay, ozen, ayin, regel. The off is the nose, which in some translations it says the wind of your nostrils, but I think Tom's version said the wind of your anger. And so this word off, it means the nose or the nostrils, hence the face, but it's occasionally a person. In other words, a person who's breathing rapidly, like as in ire or angry or anger or forbearance or suffering, nose, snout, and then wrath. So if you think it was the wrath of God, read that in verse 8. It says, "At the wrath of God, the waters were heaped up straight as a wall, stood running waters, the deep waters congealed." So it's funny because when we think of anger, we think of heat, right? Because we think of the blood that boils to our faces and our faces get red, and we think of heat. But in this context, Jehovah's anger made cold. And you think of when we talk about Jehovah being the Aleph Tav, the Aleph represents a bull or the ox with the strength. And you can just see this picture of this ox or, the bull in the bullfight, and his nose is flaring and he's angry and he's about to, Torah into something. Anyhow, you just keep that whole picture of that nose flaring and snorting, and that's who our God is. That's why he's a man of war as well. Sometimes we have this picture of this really nice, loving God, nice and loving. But he's a God of anger as well. And he has valid reasons for being angry at Egypt, just like he has valid reasons to be angry at the world that we live in today, because we are not obeying his commandments.
Well, it's quite interesting to think of that concept of anger being unleashed first to protect Israel, so that they can cross the sea. And so if we use that analogy of him using his anger to form those walls, we recognize that he's going to do something again soon after Israel crosses, to make those walls crash down again. And his anger will be unleashed there upon Egypt. Interesting. Angela.
My comment will digress for just a moment back to the supposition that Pharaoh perished in the Red Sea. And I thought that last week we read in chapter 14, verse 28, it ends, there remained not so much as one of them. So that implies that even Pharaoh perished, because it says, and all the host of Pharaoh that came in to see after them, there remained not so much as one of them. And this is echoed in Psalms chapter 136, verse 15. This is a song reciting in part this incident. In verse 15 it says, but overthrew Pharaoh and his host in the Red Sea, for his mercy endureth forever.
Could you give us that reference again? Psalm
136,
Thank you.
verse 15.
Psalm 106:11 also is a reference.
Yeah, 106:11. Ella, I didn't feel like that one was as strong as the 136, but
I didn't read it. I just saw it in the posted.
So I don't know, with what we read last week, I've often wondered, did he survive? I have seen,
In the chat,
some people
somebody
say that he did survive and go on to do other things, but
I wonder too if this concept of overthrew, even if he didn't die, this is just supposition. If he didn't die, this word overthrew means his power was taken away. I mean, can you imagine Pharaoh returning to Egypt without the army, by himself, and the people would say, what happened? How could we have lost? We're Egypt. And he would have come home with his head hung in shame if he had come home alone.
That's probably why he didn't go home in history. But there was also in the chat, somebody made a comment that somebody's found out that the four-wheeled chariot, about a 9-minute session there, I haven't looked at it, that Pharaoh's chariot was in the Red Sea, so he may not have lasted.
You don't think that there was various chariots? There was only one chariot?
No. Apparently, the Pharaoh's chariot was a 4-spoke. There were 6 and 8 spokes chariots. So the ones that were for war were heavier, whereas the one for Pharaoh would have been much more elegant. Whether that's the case or not, I don't know. But maybe the one in the study in the guy who does a 9-minute session in the chat there.
Can I elaborate?
Yeah.
That's Leonard Moeller. This was one of Ron Wyatt's, along with Jenny Caldwell's, research to see what happened in the Red Sea. It's they have extensive video on this, and they actually have a video of an outcropping of the 4-spoke golden-clad wheel. Now, everything inside of this wheel is rotten and gone. The only thing left is the outer thing, and coral will not grow on gold or silver. It only grows on wood and other objects. And that was what's left, and there's actually a visual video that shows this. And the last I recall, they did not bring it up, and they put a buoy with a sound thing on it so they can find it in the future when the Saudi Arabia allows them to go and get it. Right now, it's a protected area. They can't go get it. No one knows where it is, so it's going to be speculation until it's been pulled up and verified. However, video footage, of that time, I believe it was in the 70s when this was discovered. And there's a lot of writing on this. And Dr. Mueller is very famous for the teachings and the proof he has as an archaeologist. And I was blown away when I saw it. And if you watch the video, I don't know if that video that I linked in the chat actually has the golden spoke. I'm trying to find it, but guess what? It suddenly is not around anymore. And there's speculation. AI says, oh, it's speculation. When it happened, it was big news, and then it's kind of disappeared. So, you know what? We're going to just have to go by faith as to what happened. Yeah. I think that Joe has an awesome newsletter that he explains the potential of it being aligning with King Tut's time. It's quite an extensive study. And it shows through the act of the next dynasty after the Exodus event that someone else took over and changed the multi-theology to the one God theology. And this person looks like a woman in all their depictions, and she's very family oriented. Children's on her lap, all kinds of different things. So, it could be, and think about this. If something like this happened, your whole army is gone. You now don't know what happened to your husband and the army, but you don't want the rest of the nations to know because you'll be conquered. So she has to put on a face.
He said he can't find the link for the coral growing on the.
It's in the chat. I put it in the chat. Anyways, so
Google removed the link for the chariot wheel of the
gold. It could very well be, but I know that the 9-minute one I put on gives you a lot of understanding of the actual event outside of the gold spoke wheel. I didn't look at the whole thing. I'm going by memory from what I saw years ago. Okay. So now, there's a big video that's like a couple of hours that had it. Now, I actually have the Ron Wyatt set here, and I have it in video here. So I know I have it. But I don't know where it is online, and it's probably been scrubbed for obvious reasons. But anyways, back to the story, and Joe has it on his newsletter that explains that, if anyone found out about the fact they got destroyed in the Red Sea and there's no army, they're going to come in and destroy them. And so his wife, whoever, had to put up a fake facade to make it look like they're still strong, and they succeeded. So, and there's definitely a controversy regarding the timeline of the Egyptian timeline and the Hebrew timeline, but that's been discussed and settled. I don't want to say settled, discussed and exposed that there's a 400-year adjustment that has been settled, so to speak, by the author. I'm not sure the name of that, but there's couple books on it and worth looking into if you're interested. So I've seen all this years ago. My memory really stinks, so I'm sorry I can't pinpoint more accurately, but it's there. And I attest to it because I saw all this. I went deep dive in this stuff years ago. And I yield. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. Jose, I think you had your hand up earlier to comment on this.
Yes, sir. It wasn't exactly what we're discussing at the moment, but it's actually kind of backtracking a little bit to what Brother Shane and Sister Sombra said about the waters congealing, and when you think about it, I'm pretty sure we're all in agreement that nothing is impossible for the great I am. I mean, I read the Torah, the Bible, and I see all, his wonders to behold. And I said, whoa, this is a God thing, spiritual, it's beyond mere physicality and everything. And when you look at the, when the plagues, especially the plagues that befell Egypt, and there's a couple there, but they all stand out, but there's two when you think about it. And the one that really kind of grabs me and shakes me a little bit is the the plague where it says it hails, gigantic hailstones, and then it says they turn into fire on the floor, and then the other one about being, in the land of Goshen. Goshen is in light, and the rest of Egypt is in darkness. And there's even actually say in some of the commentaries where they say the darkness was so intense that it could be felt, and that people could put their hand in front of their face and not actually see it because that was that thick. I don't know if I've ever been in a place that's been to that degree, and hopefully never, but I just wanted to make that comment that, the great I am, if he said he could congeal the waters and make them stand up and rise up and make the ground dry where Israel could cross over, and then in the midst of all that, they fell around Pharaoh's army and as him as well. I don't doubt any of that, and I yield my time back to you. Thank you.
Thank
There
you.
was a man who did an experiment. He went down into a cave in the dark, and he lived in the dark, I think for a month, and he lost all sense of time. He kind of lost his mind. So if you can imagine that darkness that was palpable, the people would have lost their minds.
But we also recognize that all these wonders that Jehovah showed the people before the exodus of Egypt during was well known by the inhabitants of the lands around.
Can I jump on that, Stuart, about the congealing?
Yes.
Just another thought, you can make it a question or whatever. But when I think of congealed, I think of Jello. Jello is not frozen, but it will not move out of its place unless it's moved. So would it actually had to have been a wall of ice? Could it have been, just as it says, congealed where it would not move? Maybe the angels were holding it back, because then he's got to release it. Ice would take a little while, but yeah, he could fire it and melt it right quickly, I guess. Just a thought.
That's
Slugs.
interesting. I have a visual. I can picture a wall of ice. I can picture how that looks. I don't really have a good picture of what a wall of Jello would look like.
Or slush.
But being up here in Canada, I know what a wall of ice looks like. Thank you all.
I'll bet you do up there in Tundraville.
Kim.
Okay, I just wanted to throw in one more little thing about the wagon wheels. There is a Ron Wyatt Museum just below Nashville that I have been to a long time ago, and he had lots of video footage, underwater divers showing those wagon wheels, and also had still pictures all throughout the museum. But the reason they didn't try to bring them back is when they would lift them, they would crumble. Because, as you said, they were rotten on the inside, and there are these thin sheets of gold on the outside. So it was impossible to bring back samples. But I also have the VHS set, so we do have proof. That's all I wanted to say.
All right, now you got your two witnesses, Kim and me.
That's right.
Fantastic.
Do you have a VHS player?
Somewhere in the basement.
I have DVDs, actually.
Well, good.
Wonderful. Sean.
Yeah, I was just looking through some of the cross references for this song, and I found it interesting that this song was sung in Revelation 15, right, where the overcomers was singing too. And imagine the children of Israel was on the other side of the sea, on the shore, and they were singing there. And in Revelation 15, you have the overcomers singing on the shore of the glassy sea. So that was quite interesting. What I found, in that they overcame they had to overcome the power of the Antichrist and so on. So it's similar to overcoming Pharaoh and his army. on the well, they're singing on the seashore there. While the overcomers in Revelation 15 are singing at the on the glassy sea there. But I found that quite interesting.
The sea of glass, yes. God's floor.
And there's a few different videos that people have linked to of different interpretations of the Song of Moses. So they're in the chat. There's different links if anybody wants to go listen to those.
Okay, thank you. Anything else people would like to chat about from Exodus 15? We recognize that Jehovah can do many things. If it was a wall of ice, we know he can do that. If it was a wall of something else, we know he can do that as well.
And may I?
Yes.
A lot of people will say, oh, those are natural events. Well, of course they are. Who created nature? He's going to use his law of nature to accomplish his will. And when they come up with that argument, it doesn't make sense because he's in control of that. Absolutely right. He can do anything he wants with his natural laws. Absolutely.
Yeah, he can blow hordes of locusts across a continent. He can cause hail and fire to fall down on Egypt. So thank you, Glenn. Anything else for Exodus 15? Anybody want to talk about the bitter waters?
Glenn, what you said, if it's just a natural event, what that person has done is submitted themselves to the worship of Gaia. In other words, they're saying that Gaia is so powerful that when God wants to bring a plague, Gaia is the one that actually brings the natural event.
Right.
What?
It's a justification for their position, which is ridiculous.
Exactly.
The bitter waters. Well, we know it's a microcosm of what we're going to have to deal with in the future with drinking the bitter waters in Numbers. It's amazing that, I didn't see any of this in the past, but Joe's teachings have brought it up to the front where it's going to be an event where this is going to happen again. And we will be forced to drink the bitter waters and reap the effect of that. And like Joe says, it wasn't necessary. The waters resemble the people. The tree resembles the tree of life, or Yeshua, or Jehovah, Torah, all of the above that's thrown into the water, or even stands on the water and makes it pure living waters, which soothes the bitterness of the people. So it's really interesting how you can see the shadow picture in it. I just find it all fascinating. I yield.
Thank you, Glenn. Does anybody else have a comment before we move on? Linda.
Just when he was saying that was, we're going to be doing that again, I just flashed to more. Oh my, are we going to be repeating the same thing that they did in the sense of being rebellious and then having to wander 40 years in the wilderness? I hope that we have learned a lesson, but it doesn't seem that humanity seems to learn that lesson. So
Glenn and Shane, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, regarding what Linda says, is I can see that as the second Exodus is mentioned in some of the different chapters and verses, what's going to happen is many will be gathered, but only a few end up in the promised land. Not like the first Exodus, where every single man, woman, and child and animal made it through to the other side. Sick or not sick, whatever it was, they were fine all the way there. No one perished during that move. Whereas the second Exodus, they're going to be dropping left and right as their faith or bitterness develops, and their faith wanes. I can see that. And Yah is not going to allow them to come into the promised land with that kind of an attitude. That's what I read in the other verses in scriptures. And I'm sorry, I can't give you those specific verses. I'll bet you some scholarly people will be able to do that in the chat. I yield.
Thank you, Glenn. Shane.
Yeah, and this is a kind of a curiosity question, and well, Tom brought this up last week with the right and left correlation. And I'm going back to 14 where it'll specifically say their right hand and on their left. It doesn't ever says the left hand. Never mentions left hand. It always the left. And then in Exodus 15 it says right hand, and 15:12 you stretch out your right hand. I understand what's on the right side of Jehovah. Is that why don't they ever mention the left hand? I guess that's what.
The right hand is often used to define strength.
Okay. Yeah.
The strength of a being. Strength of Jehovah with the right hand.
Your left hand's your bathroom hand.
Well, it was just funny with the waters, the right hand, it was on their right hand and on their left. Never said on their left hand. But that's just me reading something maybe far into it. I was just curious.
I have an answer about the left hand. It says, in the Bible, the left hand holds significant symbolism that transcends more physicality. The concept of left hand is often associated with symbols of weakness, deception, or evil. However, a deeper examination reveals that the biblical meaning of the left hand is nuanced and multifaceted. It serves as a reminder of the subtleties of human nature and the complex interplay between good and evil within us as we explore the Bible perspective. Okay, anyhow, the Benjaminites were left-handed. They were left-handed soldiers. But we also know that the Benjaminites, they suffered as well. There's that woman that got cut into pieces, and the Benjaminites were kind of decimated. So perhaps the Benjaminites, in their left-handed sword play, there was a deceptive element to them, a wicked element to them. I don't know.
Tom.
Okay, two things, I guess. I just like to say, right and left, Benjamites for the left-handed, and the wise man's. I'm sorry, but I think of politics too. Left-leaning people are on the wrong side of history. There's something to conservatism and right-leaning people, and it says it right there in the Ecclesiastes. A wise man's understanding is at his right, but a fool's understanding is at his left. And the concordant version uses stupid, actually, as a matter of fact, come to think of it. They translate it as stupid person, inclines to the left. All right. Let me see, I want to make sure. But also, and this is something that I see, and like I say, we all have our things, right? that we see that are correct and maybe are or are not correct. Is the concordant version. I'll type that in there. Anyway, midbar, right? Midbar. That's the wilderness, right? The midbar. The midbar. Well, you notice, do you see anything in that word? Somber, you like the Hebrew, right? You like the word pictures. What is dabar?
Dabar means the word. It's also,
Yeah, right.
I mean,
And
the,
what is
the
the mem?
root of the word is a B.
And what is the, okay, and what's the mem? The place
Waters.
of, right? The
Mem is
origin of.
chaos or waters or movement.
But it's also the
movement
place
word.
of. I think of, okay, like Zabak, right? Zabak.
House.
Zabak. BX. Zabak is sacrifice. Mizbach is
the place
altar.
where you bring the sacrifice, right?
It's the place of the altar, right?
Right.
House of the word.
Well, so what is the midbar?
House of the word.
The place of the word. The origin. Where did they receive the word?
Yeah,
In the wilderness.
In the wilderness, right?
because you have to go out into the wilderness in order to be able to hear Jehovah. You have to leave the chaos of the city life.
Exactly.
Go out into the wide open spaces in order
And that's
to be
the place of
alone.
safety.
Be
And that's-
still and know that I am God. You can't be still in a city. There's too much action going on around you.
But what I'm trying to say is, we are in the wilderness right now. We're discussing the word. We're
Shabbat.
in the word. We're in the place of the word.
Because we've
And-
ceased our busyness.
And yeah, and this is the place of safety. It's in that Torah. And for me, this is what I'm not saying it's there. I'm saying this is what I see. And you know what else? While I'm on this, you might find this interesting. You might not. Dabar. What else is a dabar? You know what else is translated dabar? Bees.
Yeah.
Right? And what is a bee? How do bees pollinate? They go from flower to flower, right? Just like the word. There's a correlation between, in my mind, between bees and the word. It's the spoken word, and bees operate the same way.
Because
Collecting
their
nectar.
dance, their movement is a communication tool to tell the other bees where to go, right?
Right. We even talk about busy bees, right? Right. And then what's the product of bees?
Honey,
right?
which is wisdom.
Right. And then if you look at if you search honey and you see how that word is used in the Tanakh, especially in the more, there's like, for instance, Samson, where he cleaves open the lion. Notice the word used there. He doesn't strike the lion. He cleaves it. Kind of like when you open a book. Right? And what was in the lion? Honey. Bees and honey. And so what's the lion?
Which is again evidence that when you use the word honey, it's not talking about palm honey. It's talking about
Correct.
bee.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. Yeah, but these are things that I see in the Hebrew that are like, and then when you search honey, you search too much honey, and that's not good either. But it's and then I think of Shimshon's riddle, and how, okay, here the lion, he comes upon the lion, he cleaves it open. Right, and he goes down to the Philistine window. On his way back, he finds out, there's honey in the lion. And how many people, they're afraid of the Torah. And the Torah is scary. But once you start digging in, you see there's honey in there. And it's like, and these are things that have the Hebrew has expressed to me in my mind. I'm not saying they're there. I'm just, I find that the Hebrew uses. The Hebrew language itself uses analogy, like ruach meaning wind and spirit, because their wind helps us to understand what spirit is. You can't see it. You can see it move things, but you can't actually see the wind, you know? And it's the same thing with bees and the word. And there's just so many words like this. Anyway,
I think that's
I'm going to get off my pulpit.
But I think that's one of the reasons why we miss understanding what the sacrifices are about. Because if you're not actually looking at the meaning of each word, like what is a lamb, what is a ram, what is an ox, what is a bull, why am I offering these things on the altar? And you have to look at what the character is that these animals represent. And that's the thing within me that I have to willingly give up in order to bring it to God as a gift to him. Because this word sacrifice that we have in the English language, we sacrifice to an angry God to appease him, to earn favor so that he gives us blessing. But that's not who Jehovah is. That's those pagan gods. That's what a sacrifice is to those pagan gods. But when we bring sacrifices to Jehovah, what we're doing is we're actually bringing a gift. We're bringing a gift of ourselves because we want intimacy with him. And that's a whole completely different thing from what the pagans do when they're offering sacrifices to their gods. So I hate this word sacrifice because it's not the right word.
Offering.
The olah is an offering. It's a relationship. It's a coming face to face with God.
Yeah. Well, if you notice in your Stone Tanakh, they translate korban as sacrifice. Right, whereas like our King James version, most English versions translate this word zabak that I typed in there earlier as sacrifice. When the fact is, well, search it for yourself. Don't believe me, but if you actually search the word zabak, you will find it is always eaten. Zabak.
It's always what?
It's always eaten. It's always an eaten offering, zavak. It's barbecue. That's why you have an.
Zavak is actually about the animal.
Well, people ate flesh, and when you have a meal and you pray to God and you ask His blessing on the meal, that's what you, in a sense, is what you're doing.
But korban means to come face to face with Him.
Right, and that's the word. And that's the word in your Stone Tanakh that they translate. The the Jews translate korban, sacrifice. Christians translate zavat, sacrifice. And neither of them really means sacrifice, like you were just saying, It's really, like I agreed with your basic concept there. But yeah, search it for yourself. Search the Hebrew word zabak, translated and notice how every time it's used, you'll see it is something. It is an animal that is eaten. And just like minka is always referring to a gift, a meal offerings or a gift. The few times it's referring to animals, like when Yaakov comes to Esau, right? When he's coming back from Paran, right? And he's coming back and he's bringing all these gifts to Esau. He didn't slaughter any of them. Minka is never referring to a slaughtered animal. Actually, search the word for yourself. See if, don't believe me. Search it for yourself and notice how minka is never used to describe a slaughtered animal. And then you have to go back to Genesis chapter.
So
my wife's telling me to stop.
So the root of the word minka is, Psalm 23, right? When he brings me beside cool waters, I lay down in the grass with him, right? So minka is that act of, we've climbed the mountain, we've come beside the cool waters, and now we get to sit and rest in the grass. This is where we engage in relationship. Because when we were climbing the mountain, we were working hard. We were getting up there. When we're drinking the waters, our mouth is busy. I'm taking care of my own needs. But now I'm sitting in the grass. Now I can have a face-to-face relationship with you. It's kind of like going on a date. This word minka is like having a date with God, where you come and you sit at the table and you sit opposite each other. And it's not like today's sitting at the table with your iPhone. It's sitting at the table, eyes to eyes, talking to each other, telling about your day, telling about the things that are important to you, getting to know one another. It's intimacy. It's building that intimacy. That's what minka is. And that root, the root is that word min, and that's the rest that you do sitting in the grasses after you've had your cool drink up at the top of the mountain, Psalm 23.
Yeah. Well, the way it's used in the Torah, it's a gift. It's a gift. Esau, Jacob was giving a gift to Esau. There were animals involved. There were all the foods and whatnot were involved in that gift. Anyway, I'm way off course here.
Thank you, Tom. Paul. Angela.
Okay, so I'm going to follow up on these waters that were bitter and then made sweet. There's a mystery here, and I do not know really what it is. Bitterness that's made sweet through obedience of the commandments, statutes that he talks about. His giving us another title for his name. I am Yahuwah that heals you. But let's contrast this with the story in Ezekiel, where Ezekiel is made to eat a book that is at first sweet in his mouth, and then when it hits his belly is bitter. This is a reverse. I'm just thinking of these things. These things are coming to mind as we're studying it, and you probed us to look at these verses a little deeper. And there's a mystery here. I do not understand it. If anyone has any clarity here, verse 27 ends up, they come to this place, Elim, and there were already 12 wells there. They did not have to dig these wells. There was no effort put forward. There were 12 wells there and 70 palm trees. I mean, 12 is a picture of government and order. In 70, there's going to be 70 elders that's going to be appointed from their number a little bit later on. You see that in Numbers, but 70 could also be nations. I don't know. There is something deeper here, and I cannot grasp it.
So in Joe's book,
that's why it's a well.
in Joe's book, 10 Days of Awe, he has taken the text of a video by Rabbi David Foreman, or I think it's a podcast, a conversation between Rabbi David Foreman and Imu Shalev, and they're talking about this bitter waters. And the question is it the waters that are bitter, or is it the people that are bitter? And what is it that you're putting in order to make it sweet? Is it really a tree, or is the tree the picture of the Torah? If you put the Torah into the people, then you end up with sweet people instead of bitterness. And we see that same picture again of the wells and the water and the bitterness of the Samaritan woman. And then Yeshua said, if you knew who it was who was asking you for water, you would be asking me for water, because I'd be giving you the living waters. And so, yeah, there is a much, much deeper message in the waters of Marah. And it has everything to do with the people were bitter, and the Torah resolves that problem.
Okay. Wonder what Ezekiel's dilemma was then.
I think the thing about Ezekiel is he writes a book that's sweet in his mouth. Well, the sweetness is the victory of the 8th day. The whole Torah is all leading you to the 8th day, the eternity with Yehovah, the consumed marriage between the bride and Yehovah. That's a sweet, sweet message. But to get from here to there.
Or is it something that was given that was perfect and sweet, but that in the hands of human beings was modified and changed and twisted and became something bitter?
Well, I don't know that it's about the modification. I think it's the journey to there is bitter.
Well, Ezekiel's in Babylon, and we know that a lot of things came out of Babylon back to, I mean, maybe this is, a picture of you were given something sweet, something perfect, and you're going to end up with something corrupted, adulterated. Okay. Any thoughts about what the 70 palm trees are?
From what I understand, those 12 wells and the palm trees are still there, if you believe that it's in Saudi Arabia. I was just watching this morning, as a matter of fact. I got up quite early this morning. And it's on Patterns of Evidence, where they showed they're basically following up on the Ron Wyatt's research. And on the other side, going towards where the split stone is and all of that. You guys may have seen that, right? Weren't you? I'm thinking of Randy. I don't know if you guys went out there with Joseph, but out in the Saudi Arabia, where the mount, where the real Mount of Sinai is, or at least I believe it. On the way there, it's still there. There are 12 wells, and there's all these palm trees. What they represent exactly, I can't say for sure, but I think you're going in the right direction there with the 70 nations. That makes sense to me.
Or it could be a foreshadow that out of these 12 tribes, I'm going to raise up 70 elders. They do that in Numbers 11. That's something that is in their future.
That's a good point. That's a good connection, I think.
I don't know.
Something to follow up on. Thank you, Angela, for raising that. Shall we head over to Isaiah? Let's move over to Isaiah. And I think what we will do is read 4 and 5 together. We have 2 readers. We'll read 4 and 5 together, and then we'll midrash on both of those chapters. There's 6 verses for Isaiah 4. Deb, would you read for us, please?
Yes, Isaiah 4. And as I I read it, and then I went back to 3 to see. It starts out in that day, to see what day we're talking about. For context, it's the day of the Lord. So Isaiah 4:1 says, "And in that day 7 women shall take hold of one man, saying, We will eat our own bread and wear our own clothing. Only let us be called by your name to take away our shame. In that day shall the branch of Jehovah be beautiful and glorious, and the fruit of the earth excellent and comely for those who have escaped from Israel. And it shall be he who is left in Zion and he who remains in Jerusalem shall be called holy, even everyone who is written among the living in Jerusalem. When the Lord shall have washed away the filth of the daughters of Zion, and shall have purged the blood of Jerusalem from its midst, by the spirit of judgment and by the spirit of burning. And Jehovah will create over all the site of Mount Zion and on her assemblies a cloud and smoke by day, and the shining of flaming fire by night. For on all the glory shall be a defense, and there shall be a booth for a shade by day from the heat, and for a refuge and for a hiding place from storm and rain.
Thank you, Deb. Glenn, would you please read Isaiah 5?
Yes, sir. Isaiah 5. Please let me sing to the one I love, a song for my loved, one regarding his vineyard. My loved one has a vineyard on a fertile hill, and he dug it up and cleared it of stones and planted it with the choicest vine and built a watchtower in its midst, and also made a winepress in it. And he waited for the yieldings of grapes, but it yielded rotten ones. And now, O inhabitant of Jerusalem, a man of Yehudah, please judge between me and my vineyard. What more could have been done to my vineyard that I have not done? Why when I waited for the yielding of grapes, did it yield rotten ones? And now please let me inform you what I am doing to my vineyard. To take away its hedge, and it shall be burned. To break down its wall, and it shall be trampled down. And I lay it waste. It is not pruned or dug, and thorn bushes and weeds shall come up, and I command the clouds not to rain on it. For the vineyard of Jehovah of hosts is the house of Israel, and the man of Yehudah is his pleasant plant. He looked for right ruling, but see oppression, for righteousness, but see weeping. Woe to those who join house to house, who add field to field until there is no room, and you are made to dwell alone in the midst of the land. In my hearing, Jehovah of hosts said, truly many houses shall be a waste, big and fine ones without inhabitant. For 10 acres of vineyard yield one bath, and an omer of seed yields 1 ephah. Woe to those who rise early in the morning pursuing strong drink, who stay up late at night. Wine inflames them. And the lyre and the harp, the tambourine and the flute, and wine are in their feasts. But they do not regard the deeds of Jehovah, nor see the work of his hands. Therefore my people have gone into exile, because they have no knowledge, and their esteemed men are starved, and their crowd dried up with thirst. Therefore Sheol has made itself wide and opened its mouth without law. Excuse me. Their splendor and their crowd and their uproar, and he who is exulting within her shall go down into it. Excuse me again. And man is bowed down, and mortal man humbled, and the eyes of the proud are humbled. But Jehovah of hosts is exalted in judgment, and the set apart El is set apart in righteousness. And the lambs shall feed in their pasture, and strangers shall eat in the waste places of the fat ones. Woe to those who draw crookedness with cords of falsehood, and sin as with wagon ropes, who are saying, let him hurry, let him hasten his work so that we see it. and let the counsel of the set apart one of Israel draw near and come, so that we know. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Woe to those who are wise in their own eyes and clever in their own sight. Woe to the mighty to drink wine and brave men to mix strong drink, who declare right the wrong for a bribe, and the righteousness of the righteous they turn aside from him. Therefore, as a tongue of fire devours the stubble, and the flame consumes the chaff, their root is as rottenness, and their blossom goes up like dust, because they have rejected the Torah of Jehovah of hosts, and despised the word of the set apart one of Israel. Therefore, the displeasure of Jehovah has burned against his people, and he stretches out his hand against them and strikes them, and the mountains tremble. And their carcasses as filth in the middle of the streets. With all his displeasure has not turned back, and his hand is still stretched out. And he shall lift up a banner to the nations from afar, and shall whistle to them from the end of the earth. And see, they come with speed, swiftly. Not one of them is weary or stumbling, not one slumbers or sleeps. Not a belt shall be loosened on their loins, nor the thong of their sandals be broken. Their arrows are sharp, and all their bows bent. Their horses' hooves shall seem like flint, and their wheels like a whirlwind. And their roar is like that of a lion. They roar like young lions, and they growl and seize prey and slip away, with no one to rescue. And in that day they shall growl over it, as with the growling of the sea, and one shall look at the earth and see darkness and distress, and light shall be darkened by the clouds. Amen. That's.
Thank you, Glenn.
Well, that's definitely in that day event, isn't it? And from what was read in 4, that seems to be the New Jerusalem, and I'm not sure if this is the wrath of God, while his own is protected in Jerusalem.
He's clearing out Jerusalem in the last few chapters that we've read, right? He's holding judgment on Judah and Jerusalem. And he needs to clear out the land.
Which is what they do when you do the stripping in the winter, just after the harvest. You strip the land. That's what it sounds like here. He's stripping it out, getting rid of the old, gonna start anew.
Sombra.
Well, when I was listening, what I heard was we read chapter 4 and then we repeated the same story. Chapter 4 is a microscopic view and chapter 5 is a macroscopic view of the same story. So last week we talked a lot about women, and the first line of chapter 4 says, 7 women will grasp one man on that day, saying, we will eat our own food and we will wear our own clothes. Just let us be called by your name and end our disgrace. Okay, but it's still a disgrace. A woman who is covered by a man who has to provide for herself her own food and her own clothing is a disgrace, an absolute disgrace. And then in chapter 5, it said, woe to you who cause house to encroach against house and make field approach to field. that again is that same picture of seven women trying to be covered by one man. It's the women are the households, and they're encroaching upon each other. That's not good. We're not. Each man is supposed to be autonomous and not have his head covered. He's supposed to have a direct relationship with Jehovah, and he's supposed to have his one bride that he covers. It's not good when you have these situations with these multiple brides and everybody's trying to be covered by one man. But what you said, Glenn, about it being on that day and in that day scenario, I would say we're in that day today. Look at how many scenarios where marriages aren't working, and a woman keeps going and trying to find somebody who will be a good providing husband for her and you know, who will protect and provide for her. And when she doesn't find that in one man, she goes off and she finds it in another man. And the same thing with men. Men can't find women today who are willing to be under a man's covering. They want to be off defending themselves and protecting and providing for themselves. They won't stay under a man's covering. That's the abomination that we're seeing right now. And you've got it in the macro level and the micro level and the macro level in both of these scenarios.
Well, people aren't following Jehovah.
No. But then when you get to verse 24, or well, from there to the end, that's what it's supposed to be like. Verse 21 says, "Woe to those who are wise in their own eyes and in their own views, understanding. Woe to those who are mighty in drinking wine and men of accomplishment in pouring liquor. They acquit the wicked one because of a bribe and strip the righteousness of his innocence." I mean, if we have men who are so living in futility, depressed, that they're spending their lives drinking alcohol instead of going out there and making a living and protecting and providing for their brides. What a depressed, horrible way to live. Because go ahead.
This is not necessarily people who are depressed. They're reveling in injustice. They're reveling in themselves. They're putting themselves up on a pedestal. They're not depressed people. They're depraved people, but they're not depressed people.
That's two sides of the same coin. If you're going to be flamboyantly drinking debauchery, it's because you can't find your bearing, because you don't have an honest understanding of who you are and what your purpose in life is, that you're just going to spend your life partying or self-glorifying yourself, right? People who self-glorify, it's because they're insecure. Why are they insecure? Because they don't know how to find their identity in Jehovah, in the Torah. And those people end up becoming bullies, and those people end up becoming drunkards, and those people end up becoming depressed. Because their identity doesn't come from Jehovah. They have to bolster themselves up to make themselves bigger.
Either that or entertain themselves out of their depression.
Yeah.
So I agree with you, but I don't know that we're quite there yet, because this is what I see. I see a lot of women abandoning all men, and they're taking over that position themselves.
Yep.
And they actually are disgusted by men, and I mean vehemently disgusted. I hear it a lot.
Yep.
And then, of course, they turn to other ways to satisfy themselves, which we know turn into the movements we see today. So
But
I think we're on the
that's an insecurity as well, isn't it?
right.
Because they don't find their identity in Jehovah.
Exactly. They're not centered. They don't know where to go, so they're looking looking anywhere, and it's not towards where they should be going, which is Jehovah. So that's the biggest point right there. They're not looking for Jehovah. Then they think they can get it through a man, which that didn't work. So years and years of this since somebody mentioned the 60s, absolutely. And now they're so disgusted they don't even bother. Men are just considered, kids. That's how a lot of people relate to men. Oh, they got to go play, that sort of thing. And the women, I don't want to say they rule, but they certainly have a great influence on what the men do today. I often hear, well, I got to check with the better half, and it's men that say this. And I don't know that I agree with that kind of, it's flattering to the woman, but I think they actually mean it. And that's not very good either because they're terrible leaders.
Yeah.
But you see in here, we're getting to, I don't know what the change is going to be where the women say, we need to grab a hold of a man and use his name. It may be the turning point when Jehovah is finally here in some form or another, that the world recognizes that that's the order, the head covering, the order of the family, etc. That they say, I'm still not interested in God, but in order for me to cover my reproach, I need to hang on a man. But I'm not going to do what he says and does. I'm going to do my own thing. And they're going to look for that man that will allow that to be. And there may be some out there who will give up whatever for it, money, whatever, you know what I mean, to allow the woman to do that. So it's a Jezebel type of situation. Remember, what's his name? The king that was
Ahaz.
Yeah. So it's the same situation as that, but we don't yet see that yet today. At least I don't. I see complete rejection of all men.
So if this,
well, if I may, the context here is that the men are dying in battle. They're dying violently. They're dying because Jehovah is clearing out the land. And in my brain, I'm seeing older men being left. And there are, in this society, women looking for protection. There are not very many men left. They've all been killed off, cleaned out.
And what righteous man wants to cover 7 women?
Right.
Because the whole purpose of these 7 women grasping on that one man is so that they would end their disgrace. A woman whose head isn't covered is a disgrace. And I'm not talking about a piece of fabric. I'm talking about a woman left abandoned by her husband or abandoned by her father to fend for herself. She's in danger. That's not how we were designed. We women were not designed to fight for ourselves and defend ourselves. And so these 7 women are asking for the covering in order that they don't have to protect and provide for themselves. And yet they're saying here, we still will provide our own food and our own clothing. All you have to do is protect us. But how can he protect them if he's not really a man of honor?
Or a man of God. Jehovah. So I think we're on the cusp. I don't know that we're necessarily there, but we're so close to that event. And as you said, Stuart, about the war and the scarcity of men, well, then technically, even without war, we have a scarcity of men today. Real men. They're all, like I said, children, cowards, no leadership, can't think for themselves, real primitive. I run a business. I can't even get children. I can't even get young people in here. Forget, any age. the better luck I have is getting older people in here because they want peace and quiet instead of the mad rush of corporate work or factory work. They would rather come out here and just kind of putz around and have less pressure. So they're willing to get less money, but that's not they can't make a living off of this, you know? So I see we're getting close. So there's got to be something that's going to happen that's going to cause a scarcity of men. Maybe like you said, some sort of a war. Yeah.
Angela.
I would say to remember that the division of chapters is kind of like a modern construction. And if we remove that this is chapter 4 and read it as a continuation of the portion that we read last week, we'll remember the manner in which these women were presenting themselves, dressing as men, doing the duties of men. Look at what their bonnets were, the ornaments, and they were wearing crescent-shaped headbands. They were bringing in a lot of pagan worship. They were going their own way, doing their own thing. And so when we apply this context and verse 25, that the men are scarce, they've fallen by the sword, and then we begin in what is our portion today. In that day, 7 of these women who were, highbrowed, wayward, doing their own thing, are going to grab a hold of a righteous man and say, look, just give us your name, marry us. You don't have to worry about providing our food, providing our clothing. In fact, we kind of like what we're doing. We just want in name only, which is a lie. His needs are something else. They're only wanting the semblance of authority over them. They want to keep control of their own authority. In actuality, they just want the covering of the name only, just to take away their reproach, is how I see it.
Thank you, Angela. Tom.
Yeah, that's, or are they looking to these men to rescue them out of their state? Because people, sometimes you have to get pretty low before you realize how low you've gone. And because right after it says, in that day, the growth of Jehovah will be beautiful and glorious, and the fruit of the land excellent. And it'll come to pass that he that is left in Zion, the survivors, the righteous one, that remains shall be called holy, everyone that's written unto life in Jerusalem. This, are these women, recognizing how, things are going so far down that they're looking for an escape, and they don't even, they just want to be with a righteous man, and they don't care if they even provide for them. Just give me your name and let me attach myself to you, because I don't want to be in that state anymore. Because in the next chapter we got Jehovah's saying, look at my vineyard. Haven't I done everything I can for my vineyard? And look at what it's become. And he's going to bring judgment. He's bringing judgment on it. Now, I think this is referring to, when Babylon comes, Assyria and Babylon come against, Israel and Judah, and how they've fallen. They've become like, the rulers, and there's no justice in the land. The people who are on top are just, grinding the people on the bottom down to there's no justice in the land. And Jehovah's lamenting. It's like, look, I've done everything I can for these people, and look at what they've become. And he's going to bring judgment. And I think I kind of see these women trying to escape that judgment. They're looking. They don't want to be caught up in that. They want to be with one of these who will survive, the righteous ones who are not caught up in this, self-serving, pride. But prophecy is difficult. It's difficult for me. So I don't know. Releasing the mic.
Thank you, Tom. Sombra.
Okay, so using Stuart's reference to the fact that this is wartime and there's not many men left. Well, the men who've come back from battle are men who've come back victoriously, right? And so these women want to be known as the wife of a victorious man. In other words, they want the reputation. And we talked about the left hand and whether they were righteous or evil or, underhanded or deceitful. Are these men of good wartime reputation, but really they're left-handed, they're a bit corrupt? Because if these women what righteous man would willingly take on 7 women who have to protect and provide for themselves? That doesn't make any sense. A man who takes a woman to be his partner in life, he wants a strong, capable woman, but he also wants somebody who's a soft place to fall. He wants a woman to make a home for him so that when he goes out to war, what he comes home to, like somebody said in the chat, respect. He comes home to this woman who's making making the house a home, a castle, a place of safety, a refuge. He doesn't want to come home to a woman who's out doing her own work and out pursuing her own desires and her own wealth, but hanging on his coattails because she's got his reputation. Angela.
Yeah, Sombra, am I on? Yeah, okay. Listen, I agree with you, and that is right thinking from the men's perspective. But look at the context of the first verse there. This is all the actions. This is the words of 7 women. This is their idea to provide their own clothing, to provide their own food. This is not a situation that's impressed upon them. This is their idea. This is their solution to their problem. It's like, all I want is your name. I'll do my own food. I'll do my own clothing, probably even keep their own house. They're wanting to continue in this continuation of the type of woman that we discussed last week.
Are you saying a righteous one or a non-righteous one?
No, I think that this is not righteous. I think this is a continuation of the women that were described last week.
I completely agree with you. This is, I'm not blaming either one. I'm saying the women aren't right and the men aren't right in this situation. Neither one of them.
And a righteous man is not going to want one of these women, whether it's 1 or 7.
Right, exactly.
But this is going to be the state of things, and their mindset hasn't changed. It is eventually going to change. In verse 4, there is forecast a time when it says, when Yahuwah shall have washed away the filth of the daughters of Zion, and shall have purged the blood of Jerusalem from the midst thereof by the spirit of judgment and by the spirit of burning. So they are going to come to a better way of thinking, but it's not going to be through a gentle process.
No.
No.
That's what I'm saying is it looks fearful. I mean, it looks like a terrible time, which, like I said, is not yet here, but we're on a cusp of judgment that is not going to be comfortable. And it's going to have people making compromising decisions that are not necessarily good for them. And like you said, the man, a righteous man, is not going to compromise. Okay, and this sounds like a compromising man if he's letting 7 women do whatever they want, use his name, you know. But I just don't quite understand the covering or headship with the man, unless the men were righteous to begin with. That's the whole plan of the family, and having the spokesman of the family, and having that what I put it, it's synergistic. It's not overstepping any. It's not an authoritarian thing, as we know through our readings with Guardian Angel. We're different in our roles, but we are still equal as people in the eyes of God. We're not male, female, Greek, whatever. So I just find it interesting that there's something about a man in this time that, even though they're not godly men, they're still looking for that name. I don't understand that. And I yield at that. Thank you.
We have to remember also that while there is a lesson here, literally men and women, males and females at this time interacting and experiencing this, this is also a metaphor for Israel being the bride, the supposed bride, or a woman that Yahuwah is coming for. And that this is why chapter 5 kind of switches gears and goes about the same teaching, only using horticulture, using a grape vineyard. That, look, I started you guys out on the right path. I put a hedge of protection. There was a mighty tower in the midst of you. And I'll be darned, these beautiful grapevines turned into wild, stinking grapes that aren't good for anything. And I have no recourse but to tear down the hedge, to tear everything down and purge it. So it's, if we can't understand the lesson in this way about the woman that comes to Yahuwah with all of this pagan luggage that she carries around and wants his name to be over her, but she doesn't want to leave off all of these other practices, then he'll teach us this, why this is such an important thing to him by using horticulture in chapter 5 here today.
Mm-hmm. He still needs to clean out his vineyard.
Yeah, and it's not going to be pleasant. Judgment begins in the house of Yahuwah. So
it's the stripping season.
And what's the purpose of the hedge, too?
Yeah.
The purpose of the hedge is to keep us walking the righteous path. So if he's going to remove the hedge that protects us because we're not walking the righteous path, well, he's letting us have what we want. The problem is we don't know what we want. We don't know what's good for us.
Tom, did you want to get in on this?
I need some help actually. Because I'm obviously not getting it. Why are these women concerned about their reproach being taken away? Please explain that part of this. I don't understand.
My first guess is the culture at the time is that a woman who didn't have a husband or her father taking care of her had some shame.
So they want to they're begging a man to take them under her wing, even and they don't even care if they provide for him. Just please, at least remove my reproach, and then she's going to continue into behavior. Is that what you're saying? Because I guess I'm missing it. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just I don't understand.
The way my mind reads through the previous passage in this one is that the men are being humbled through death. They're being cleaned out through death and war. There's a huge humbling that happens there. And then the way I see chapter 4 starting out is that the women are also being humbled in that society at the same time. I may be wrong, but this is the way I've been seeing this. The culture requires the women to be provided for, but we have these women who are capable of providing for themselves. And so I see it as a partial humbling to not have a man, and they're trying to find another man, but they still haven't been humbled because they want to provide for themselves. And we read in the rest of the passage, Jehovah is still cleaning out Judah and Jerusalem. And at some point in time, he will have a holy people left there. But just like you, Tom, I'm curious to know what's really happening here too. I'm somewhat confused as well. Angela, did you want to comment on that?
Okay, so it's really easy to see in our current time. I mean, I live in the Bible Belt here, and there is a pride in people like, I go to this church, I'm a member of this church, I'm a Christian. People wear t-shirts, they're bold about being a child of God, and they love Jesus Christ. They're outwardly, they're like, they're putting on the name. Okay, and they walk in the community. They're proud of it. They have no reproach. But are they eating? Are they bringing their own food? Are they bringing their own clothes? They're providing their own clothes, because they're definitely not, putting on their husband's clothes, what he would have them wear. They're definitely not eating what he would have them eat. They're bringing their own things, got their own rules, but they want his name. They want to be part of that establishment. Historically, Isaiah is in the midst of a Jerusalem that is extremely corrupt. These women, okay, metaphorically, females and males, okay, there is that level. There is also the level that Yahuwah is the man, right? And the men of Israel, Judah, are the female. And they are bringing their own clothes. They are in the midst of syncretized religion. They are polluting the temple worship. They're mingling. Okay, they're wanting to bring their own ideas in, and this is a picture of it there. But there's also, this is what's going on in chapter 5, only through a lesson with agriculture. It's the same lesson. So I mean, that's as I see it here. It's easy to see today. I mean, I think Yahuwah hangs his head in shame, just can't even bear to look at, at what some of these churches do in his name. But we'll bring our own food. We'll take care of ourselves. We'll bring our own clothes. We just want your name. We want the prestige of being part of the establishment. And it just stinks. It really does. It makes a mockery of Yahuwah. So
Thank you, Angela.
that's how I see this. I don't know.
That's a relevant picture. Yeah, thank you. Sombra.
Shane wrote over here that Anita brought up 7 women is equal to the 7 churches in Revelation. And so exactly what Angela was saying, when we think about clothing, in other words, they're bringing their own covering. They don't need the blood of Jesus to cover their sins. They're bringing their own covering. And then in terms of food, they're going to provide their own food. In other words, they don't need to bring the sacrifices, the food that Tom was talking about. They don't need to bring food, or so they are bringing their own food because they don't need Jehovah to provide the food for them. So they're bringing their own sacrifices, or sacrifices in their own way. So we need both. We need to be covered by the blood of Yeshua, and we need to bring the sacrifices, the minka offering, because we need to be in relationship with him. And all those things, all the things in the Torah are a picture of how to have the relationship with him. You can't just claim, I'm Jesus because I'm wearing the t-shirt. I have Jesus because, or I'm a Christian, I'm wearing his name. And that's enough. It's not enough. You can't just claim to be a Christian and say, I've got my golden ticket. That's not enough. You have
And their own food is their own liturgies too, Sombra. Their own, they abandon the simplicity of the Torah and Yeshua's teachings that even a little child could understand, in favor of these lofty liturgies and prayers and showy music and anything but the food that Yahuwah provides for his bride. Anything but that. Any festival, any holiday but the feast of Yahuwah. Anything but your food. We'll provide our own food. We just want your name.
Yeah.
We want the prestige of that.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is Jehovah humbling them doesn't work? And Jehovah says, because the daughters of
they are
Zion
going to,
are 40.
in verse 4, this
I'm
humbling is going to come.
Yeah, it's the humbling that's coming. It hasn't come yet, and they have been humbled.
In that day, right. I'm reading in chapter 3. In that day, Jehovah takes away the finery of the anklets, the pendants, the bracelets, the headdresses, the rings, all of that. And instead of sweet fragrance, it's a smell of decay. And the men will fall by the sword and your strength in battle. And her gates shall lament and mourn, and she, deserted, shall sit on the ground. I mean, this woman's beaten down.
Yep.
And she's saying, look, take away my reproach, please, somebody. I'll do anything. You don't even have to provide for me.
So, Tom, what you're saying is that is a woman who's already been humbled, and now she's asking for help. She's at the bottom of the well, and she's realizing she can't get out. But that's not who these 7 women are. These 7 women are at the bottom of the well, and they're trying to find their own way out of the well.
Then why would she care about having a man take away a reproach?
Because that gives her the reputation of being a righteous woman. Even though she's still not righteous, she's still not behaving righteously, but she wants the name, the reputation of being a righteous woman.
Maybe that's why men and women think so differently.
But here's the question. It's like, so what we should be asking, what was the nature of the syncretism going on in Isaiah's day? We should be trying to root that out and figure that out, because we are the remnant and we are looking for the restitution of all things, the restoration of all things. How do we get back to the original concept?
You don't clothe yourself.
Isaiah is putting his finger in the chest of the establishment here.
You don't clothe yourself.
What was the establishment doing?
So in Amos, you've got the house of Israel, and the house of Israel has taken on the foreign gods. There's King Succoth and Kiyun, which is a star god. In other words, they're in adultery in the fact that they've taken on other gods. In Isaiah, you're talking to the house of Judah, and the house of Judah is claiming their own righteousness. In other words, I can clothe myself and I can feed myself. I just have to be called righteous. I just want the title of righteous because I can take care of me and my own. So again, it's that picture of you have to have both the covering of Yeshua and the sacrifices, and the commandments. It's not just the sacrifice, and the mitzvot of keeping the covenant. Whereas some people will just claim I'm a Christian or claim to be the bride, and they've never actually met him. Like, have you ever met a person who says they're Christian, but they've never actually read the Bible? They don't go to church. I just believe in God. Well, you can't, what does that mean? I just believe in God. If you don't spend any time with him, if you haven't changed your behavior, you can't claim to be a Christian just because you live in a Christian country. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, it's on our money, bro.
So what you're saying is they're being phonies.
In God. Yes.
They're being phonies. They really don't care about their reproach being taken away. They just wanna. They're just looking for a way out. They don't really care. It's not genuine.
Actually, Tom, I think that they're just so shallow that they believe that if they use the name that, like in God we trust, to put that on the money to one nation under God, that this somehow gives us favor. I'm speaking of the United States. I'm speaking of our Pledge of Allegiance and, even on our money, our currency, in God we trust.
They don't say what God.
Like this is some kind of Christian nation, and we are not wearing the clothes that Yahuwah tells us to wear, or we're not eating the food that he gives us in Torah, his word. Absolutely not. So we're providing our own stuff, but we want the prestige of his name. It's shameful.
Okay. Well, let's continue with Isaiah. Let's read chapter 6. Shauna is reading 6, and then we'll read Isaiah 7. Gabrielle will be reading that for us, and then we'll have the next phase of Midrash.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, Shauna.
In the year of King Uzziah's
Ahaziah's death, I saw Adonai sitting on the throne, high and lifted, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Seraphim were standing above him. Each had 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, and 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew. One called out to one another and said, Holy, holy, holy is Adonai Sabaoth. The whole earth is full of his glory. Then the posts of the door trembled at the voice of those who called, and the house was filled with smoke. Then I said, Oi to me, for I am ruined, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I am dwelling among a people of unclean lips. For my eyes have seen the King, Adonai Sabaoth. Then one of the seraphim flew to me with a glowing coal in his hand, which he had taken with tongs from the altar, and he touched my mouth with it and said, Behold, this has touched your lips. Your iniquity is taken away, and your sins atoned for. Then I heard the voice of Adonai saying, Whom should I send for all, and who will go for us? So I said, Hineni, send me. And then he said, Go tell this people, hear without understanding, and see without perceiving. Make the heart of this people fat, and the ears heavy, and their eyes blind. Else they would see with their eyes, and hear with their ears, and understand with their hearts, and return and be healed. Then I said, Adonai, how long? And he answered, Until cities are laid waste and without inhabitants. Houses are without people, and the land is utterly desolate. Adonai will drive people far away. Their desertion of the land will be vast. Though a tenth will still be in it, it will again be burned, as a terebinth tree or as an oak, whose stump remains when cut down, so the holy seed will be the stump.
Thank you, Shauna. Let's continue. Gabrielle, could you read Isaiah 7?
Isaiah 7. And it came to be in the days of Ahaz, son of Jotham, son of Uzziyahu, sovereign of Yehuda, that Rezin, sovereign of Aram, and Pekah, son of Remaliahu, sovereign of Israel, went up to Jerusalem to fight against it, but could not prevail against it. And it was reported to the house of David, saying, Aram has set up camp in Ephraim, and his heart and the heart of his people were moved, as the trees of the forest are moved with the wind. And Jehovah said to Yeshayahu, Go out now to meet Ahaz, you and Shear-Yashub your son, at the end of the channel of the upper pool on the highway of the launderer's field. And say to him, Take heed and be calm, do not fear or be faint-hearted for these 2 stubs of smoking firebrands, for the fierce displeasure of Rezin and Aram and the son of Remaliahu, because Aram, Ephraim, and the son of Remaliahu have plotted evil against you, saying, Let us go up against Yehuda and tear it apart and break it open for ourselves and set a sovereign over them, the son of Tabael. Thus said the Master Jehovah, It's not going to stand, nor shall it take place. For the head of Aram is Damascus, and the head of Damascus is Rezin, and within 65 years Ephraim is to be broken as a people. And the head of Ephraim is Shomron, and the head of Shomron is the son of Remaliahu. If you do not believe, you are not steadfast. And Jehovah spoke again to Ahaz, saying, And a sign for yourself from Jehovah your Elohim, make deep the request, or make it high. But Ahaz said, I do not ask, nor try Jehovah. And he said, Hear now, O house of David, is it not enough that you weary men, that you weary my Elohim also? Therefore Jehovah himself gives you a sign. Look, the maiden conceives and gives birth to a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. He eats curds and honey when he knows to refuse evil and choose the good. For before the child knows to refuse evil and choose the good, the land that you dread is to be forsaken by both her sovereigns. Jehovah brings on you and your people and your father's house days that have not come since the day that Ephraim turned away from Yehudah, the sovereign of Ashur. And it shall be in that day that Jehovah whistles for the fly that is in the farthest part of the rivers of Mizraim, and for the bee that is in the land of Ashur, And they shall come, and all of them shall rest in the steep ravines and the clefts of the rocks, and on the weeds, and in all pastures. In that day Jehovah shall shave with a razor hired beyond the river, with the sovereign of Asher, the head and the hair of the legs, and also remove the beard. And it shall be in that day that a man keeps alive a young cow and 2 sheep. And it shall be that he shall eat curds because of the plenty milk he gets, for everyone left in the land shall eat curds. And it shall be in that day every place where there were 1,000 vines worth 1,000 shekels of silver, let it be for thorn bushes and weeds. With arrows and bows one shall go there, because all the land shall be thorn bushes and weeds. And to all the hills which were tilled with the hoe, you do not go for fear of thorn bushes and weeds, but it shall be for sending oxen to, and a place for sheep to roam.
Thank you. Thank you, Gabrielle. And Shauna, thank you. Ooh. Who wants to comment first? There's a lot in Isaiah 6 as well as in Isaiah 7.
So when we were talking earlier about the Hebrew, that very last line that Gabrielle read was, it will be a place for ox to graze and sheep to roam. So the ox is strong, but it's yoked. So it's powerful, but it's powerful because it's under authority. And the sheep need protection. They need protection from the shepherd. And so these are both a picture of who we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be strong and powerful, but under the authority of Jehovah. And at the same time, so desperately unable to protect yourself that you need the shepherd to protect you. So these are like these balances, right? The balances of who we're supposed to be. We're not supposed to be all power. We're not supposed to be all weak. We have to be balanced. We have to be balanced in our relationship under the covering of the blood, but we also have to be balanced in the doing of the word. You know that verse that says, I'll show you my faith by my works. You show me your faith by your works, or your works by your faith. You have to have both. You can't just have faith and you can't have just works. They have to both be in balance.
I see something in 7, 14. Therefore, Jehovah himself gives you a sign. Look, the Alma conceives and gives birth to a son, and she shall call his name Emmanuel. Isn't Alma, is that virgin or maiden?
The King James has a virgin shall conceive. Alma, yes.
Betula is virgin.
And then in Emmanuel, I've heard that is translated as God with us. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So this is almost like a sign of what's to come, obviously not in Ahaz's time. And he gives that, therefore Jehovah himself gives you, he's talking to Ahaz. I just find that interesting.
So going back to that Hebrew, that Alma that you said,
Mhm.
Alma means a lass, as veiled or private, a damsel, a maid, a virgin. But the word Alma is Ayin Lamed Mem He, and if you go to the root of it, it's the Ayin Lamed, and the Ayin Lamed is the work, the yoke. It's a picture of the eye, is a picture representing knowledge and experience, and the Lamed is a picture of a shepherd's staff or a yoke. Combined, these two mean the experience of the staff. The yoke, a staff, is lifted over the shoulders. It is attached to the ox to perform the work. So when you add yoke or work to when you add the mem and the hay to that yoke, that mem is that chaos or the movement, and the hay is the window by which you see Yehovah. So this is work done for the purpose of Yehovah. It's interesting because if you put the mem before the yoke, before the ayin and the lamed, if you have the word is mal, it means transgression. In other words, the mem or the chaos comes before the yoke. And if you have the mem in between, if you have the ayin, mem, lamed, then you have labor.
Which would be the next word, conceives, maybe.
Laborer, laborer, worker, servant.
Well, yeah. I mean, giving birth is laborious, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Just for information, when David is going to take on Goliath, Saul calls him the male version of the word Alma, the masculine version of the word. And it would be Hebrew 5958 in Strong's.
So that word is elem. It means something kept out of sight. That is a lad, a young man, a stripling. Okay, so then you take that word kept out of sight, and then in the feminine, it's private. These are similar, aren't they?
Well, I was just pointing out the masculine form is used there to describe David, and the feminine form is used to describe different young women in the Torah.
Should we go to Psalms?
Yes, shall we? Okay. Let's go to Psalm 121. Gabrielle is reading that as well. Okay.
Psalm 121. I lift up my eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from? My help comes from Yehovah, maker of the heavens and earth. He does not allow your foot to be moved. He who watches over you does not slumber. See, he who is guarding Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. Jehovah is your guard. Jehovah is your shade at your right hand. The sun does not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. Jehovah guards you from all evil. He guards your being. Jehovah guards your going out and your coming in, now and forever.
Amen. Thank you, Gabrielle. That comes to those who follow him.
Exactly. Be in his palm and you'll be covered. These are promises, in my opinion. These are promises. So if you're doing what you're supposed to do to the best of your abilities, maybe you do falter here and there, but you're doing it with all your heart. He promises these things, and I can't see him breaking them unless you break yours. It's been my experience anyway.
Thank you, Glenn. Any other thoughts, comments for Psalm 121?
I just have, I remember when I was very young, that I thought, because my native state is West Virginia, and it's totally in the Appalachian Mountains. So the mountains are so near and dear to hillbillies. And I used to think that I just loved this song because it says, I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills from whence cometh my help. And then as I grew in my walk, I realized that this needs to be phrased as a question, not a statement. It's not the mountains that is the source of our help. I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills. From whence cometh my help? You're looking around in desperation. And then the answer is verse 2. My help comes from Yahuwah, which made heaven and earth. And so I remember that being a point of growth for me to realize that verse number 1 should be phrased as a desperate question rather than a statement.
And that's interesting because this psalm is one of the songs of ascent. So when you're walking up to Jerusalem for the Hags, you're going to be singing these psalms and you're going to be walking through the mountains. And like you said, looking up to the mountains, is it the mountain itself that gives you your help? No. Is it the earth that gives you your help? No. It's Jehovah. But if I'm looking up as I'm going up to Jerusalem, I'm going up. That's why it's a psalm of ascent, because you're going up. And again, it's that whole looking up for where does your salvation come from? It comes from obedience and relationship with Jehovah. Tom.
So, Angela, yours doesn't have the question?
No.
Mine does.
No, it ends with a period.
Because mine has the question mark right after.
All punctuation is, as I said, it's a modern kind of construction. But when this King James was put together in 1611, they ended it with a period, but it really should be phrased as a question.
I've got the ISR, Yeah, the scriptures. And it does end with a question mark, but like you said, there were no punctuations in those days. So literal license, what do we call it? Translator's license, maybe. Makes sense that it should be a question, though. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Linda, would you like to comment here?
Yes, I guess I would like to look at mine in verse 7 says, Yahweh will guard you from all harm, and he will guard your life. Is there maybe Sombra? Could you look up the definition of harm? I have a hard time with this because I think that my definition of harm is different than what he's talking about here. And I'll list examples. Okay, so in the New Testament, Paul is left in the open sea for 3 days. And I call that kind of harmful in my estimation. And also then, Stephen is killed. And those are just two things. And I understand the concept of that we will be martyred. But I guess it feels like a oppositeness that is a lot of tension there for me, so that, just because I have a definition of harm for me doesn't mean that God is going to protect me from all harm, if that makes any sense.
And the problem again is the translation. So the word is ra'ah, this resh ayin hey, and the root of that word is ra, which is resh ayin, and resh ayin is bad or evil, or grief. So Jehovah shall preserve you from all evil. So if you stay under the covering,
let's just assume that we are. I'm certainly trying to, and so.
Okay. So again, if you're under the covering, you're moving through life. The chaos is out there. It's not like the chaos is gone. It's not like you're just living in a pasture land with peaceable animals and everything. The chaos is still happening all around you. But because you're under the covering, it passes by. You pass through the chaos. And so what you said about Paul being shipwrecked for 3 days, yes, that's the chaos. However, Jehovah brought him through that, and he comes out the other side of that story. Now, if you keep going down the story, Paul ends up dying, right?
Right.
Okay. So, but Paul may end up dying in the physical, but where is Paul eternally?
Yes, of course. I'm just more concentrating on right here and right now, and the kinds of harm that I feel do come. And then how do I not have a cognitive dissonance with it? So like if I'm in the ocean on the first day, I'm going, okay, Father, help. And yes, at that point in time, to me, there's harm happening. Yeah, I'm not being patient, obviously. But the second day, I would still feel the same way. I guess I probably wouldn't be able to reconcile that in my brain until, yeah, I was finally rescued from it.
So you have to hold on to hope. And this is this is an excellent exercise, what you're talking about, right? Not that I'm saying, hey, Linda, go out there and get yourself deserted in the ocean, for 3 days and see what happens.
Yeah, no.
In order to practice. But the point is, okay, so next time you have one of these harms, and hopefully we're talking about a little harm, right? You have to hold on to hope. You have to practice enduring in hope, so that the next time when you come upon a harm, and that harm is a little bit longer lasting, you've already got the strength of, okay, last time I know that I held on to hope and I endured and God saw me through. Okay, so this time it's a little bit worse. I'm going to continue to hold on to hope. I'm going to continue to endure and trust him. And then that will help you get through. But you said in a chat before, because I said before, that we all have this idea of a loving God, but he is also a wrathful God. He does snort and he does produce anger at the appropriate time. And sometimes when we have parents who were angry at us when we were innocent children, and maybe we even didn't do something that deserved even correcting, we just existed, but them in their sinfulness, in their wounded state, took out their anger at something else in their life, but they took it out on us and we didn't do anything. Sometimes then you extrapolate the experience you had with that parent to the experience that you have with our heavenly parent.
Exactly, but also I was raised Baptist, and to me, the Baptist that I was raised in was hellfire and brimstone.
Right.
So it also compounded that.
Right.
And, there's a lot of having to relearn and relook at the scriptures to get a balance from Genesis to Revelation for me.
Yeah.
And, this is what you've been raised in all your life.
Yeah.
And then to have another perspective. So
this is where you have suffered what we call spiritual abuse, or abuse by church, right? It's not necessarily abuse by parents, it's abuse by church. And so what you have to do is you have to take captive that experience and recognize who you think you are based on what they said about you. So how do I identify myself? What do I think about myself because of the abuse that I've suffered in? And if the church has told me I'm a sinner and I deserve hellfire and damnation, it's really hard to see yourself as victorious and the bride and somebody who's chosen and wanted and valued, right?
Oh yeah.
So you have to take captive what you have believed about yourself because of what you've been told, and you have to take captive that moment and reconcile it against what the Word of God says. And the Word of God says, no, you're his treasure. He created the whole universe just for Linda so that he could have Linda as his bride. I mean, that's the way I think about things, right? He created this whole universe. He created the whole week. He created the concept of a month. He created the concept of a year. He created the concept of the millennia. Why? So that I could be born at this time and he could choose me as his bride. That's huge. And he did it all for me. And that's so wonderful. But then you have to forgive those who harmed you, that made you think that you weren't worthwhile, that you weren't valuable, that you were just sinful and worth being crushed. Well, those people need to be forgiven. Why? Because when you forgive them, that gives God the freedom that his blood covers their sin. Because as long as you're holding on to that debt that they owe you,
What debt do they owe me? I don't think they owe me anything. I mean, there are far too many of them that I don't even know their names. I
It's
mean,
not,
it's just more like it's a denomination, I think, and
yes,
it's the spirit that rules over that kind of denomination that is not the truth of Jehovah. And
yes,
you forgive the denomination, for at least for me, I forgive the denomination as a whole because
yes,
they were doing the best they could with the knowledge that they were looking at for themselves.
yeah,
And therefore you forgive them. And I think you do the same for other people even today in your life that may just
yep,
not even be like them. I mean, because we're told to forgive.
yep,
And forgiveness to me is a process. I
yep.
mean, that was something that was
And
very
forgiveness does not
helpful.
mean restoration.
Right. But I was never taught that. And yeah, so yeah, it all kind of just is
So you
piled
can,
up everywhere. But I have spent a lot of time, I don't know, in the last 15 years because God has brought me on this path, reading his word to find the truth. And then ultimately, he is the only one I can trust.
yep,
And then forgiving those because uh, they don't know what they're doing.
right. Yep,
So,
exactly. So then, because that wound was in you, on you, then you do other things to people that you love to protect yourself so that that doesn't happen again. And so the next step is you have to repent of doing that. And Linda, you sound to me like you're already way along this journey anyhow. You're never going to forget what you learned. You're never going to forget what you experienced. I'm never going to forget the abuse that I suffered. But that doesn't mean that um, it's
that we don't use it as something that Yehovah's taught us and showed us, and then is now protecting us from by us asking to have his wisdom and his discernment. You froze.
sorry, I'm trying to
Oh,
understand what you said.
oh. I think that he can use our past
Yes.
because to me, he takes our ashes and he redeems them. And it says in Romans also 8 that, uh, he will turn around those things that Satan meant for evil against us. And I'm claiming that the things that I went through are only to teach me and brought me closer to Father because of my desire to know the truth and seeking him out, if
Yeah.
that,
Yep. Yep.
you
That's
know.
exactly how it would be.
But
And
when I read these verses sometimes, though,
it's triggering.
yeah,
Yeah.
yes, Yehovah will guard you from all harm. Well,
Yep.
I guess ultimately he will guard me from the harm of um uh, that I wouldn't be able to live forever with him, and probably all the rest. That's probably
Yeah.
not quite to be taken hold of yet, if that,
Yeah. You
you
have
know,
now it's about taking the eternal view, right? It's not about
yeah.
in the moment, it's about the eternal. And
But I wondered what, this. You guys all seem to be very mature and have done a lot of searching yourselves. And if anybody else had dealt with this, because it's just like a few years ago, I went into a situation that I was praying, 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 and expecting God to, like, it's the verse where nothing evil, no, something to do with God will defend you in a court of law. And it says you will be able and you will come out victorious. And in my perspective, in what has happened, God did not protect me in a court of law. And therefore, my interpretation of that scripture was very immature, or I had the wrong, I just had the wrong definition of certain things in that verse. And therefore, I needed to look at the verse again and go back to Father and ask him about it.
Yeah.
And then also, regardless of whether he did or didn't, kind of like Job, will I take just only good for him or also evil? And I want to choose that regardless, though he slay me, yet will I trust him. But I guess I haven't ever had to experience that and to such a depth of having.
So this idea that the sins of the father will go down to the third and fourth generation, and then we've been taught, take captive the sin and rebuke that generational curse and deal with it, so that repent, so that it doesn't affect your descendants. So I thought that me dealing with my childhood abuse meant that I would be protecting my children from suffering the same thing.
Yeah, I can see that, because that's part of,
and for as much as I'd love to say, oh yes, that's absolute truth, it's not absolute truth. My daughter did suffer the same thing as I suffered in a slightly different manner, but she did suffer the same thing. And so then I'm beating myself like, oh, I should have done more. I should have done it earlier. I should have done whatever. No, hold on a second. Okay, there are things that happened to me and I grew through them. Well, guess what? Things happened to my daughter and she grew through them. And when we talk today about, do you wish what happened hadn't happened? And she says, no, Mom, because it made me who I am today, and I like who I am today.
Yeah.
Oh, hallelujah.
Right. I mean, but isn't that God taken to me, you just described? He takes our ashes, and if we're willing to give them to him, he can make something beautiful out of them.
Yeah.
But wow. Yeah.
But the things that, I would never have wanted that to happen to my daughter. And yet she can see what you said, the beauty for ashes, right?
Yeah. It's just quite a price, and is a lot of walking through a lot of things that takes a lot of years. So, but thankfully, in 3 days, Paul was rescued. and and I have the hope that when I die, yay, this will be
the eternal hope.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, well, thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you. Angela, did you want to comment? You have your hand up?
I just wanted to add to what Sombra so beautifully pointed out to Sister Linda, that maybe a large part of her confusion was the weakness of the translation. Literally, those words, shall keep thee from all harm. I also have it as evil, Re'ah. And then he shall preserve thy soul, Linda. The tail end of verse 7 is nephesh. It's a little bit stronger than life. And if you look at verse 8, it says, Yahuwah shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in. That's just like an idiom for life, our leaving this life and our coming into the eternity, to preserve us from evil. Evil is not sin itself, but the consequences of sin. So like Sombra said, if we are staying in the word, it's going to keep us from sin, and therefore we won't suffer the consequences of sin. There too, this psalm, some of the psalms are attributed to Hezekiah and not to David, and this is one of them that's attributed to Hezekiah. And when we take these verses that Linda made us look at and unpack, and then we understand that Hezekiah is writing this. This is happening at a time when Sennacherib is surrounding Jerusalem, is holding Jerusalem siege. So Hezekiah is lifting up his eyes. He's looking at the hills at this surrounding army, and he's like, well, where's my help now? He's asking this question, and then awareness comes on him. And we can find, Linda, these verses that you made us look at, we can find the fulfillment of this in 2 Chronicles chapter 32, 22. Where Hezekiah is delivered from this siege. 2 Chronicles 32, 22 says, thus Yahuwah saved Hezekiah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem from the hand of Sennacherib, the king of Assyria, and from the hand of all other, and guided them on every side. He has saved him from the consequences of sin. He's kept calamity from him, and he has preserved his nephesh. Hezekiah, his going out and his coming in is preserved.
Very good.
And I just think that it's wonderful revisiting this psalm with you guys. It appeals to the historian in me. It appeals to the poetry. And oh my gosh, it's just a badge of courage that we can put on, isn't it?
Thank you. Thank you, Angela, and thank you, Linda and Sombra. Let's move on to John. Let's go to John 4. 43 through 529. Sombra, you're reading that, right? 26. Sombra, you there? John 4. 43. Shall I read that instead? I'll read that. Looks like Sombra's involved in something. Okay. John 4:43. 2 days later, Jesus left for Galilee from there, since Jesus himself had testified that a prophet has no honor in his own country. When he arrived in Galilee, the Galileans welcomed him because they had seen everything that he had done in Jerusalem during the festival, and because they too had gone to the festival. So Jesus returned to Cana in Galilee, where he had turned the water into wine. Meanwhile, in Capernaum, there was a government official whose son was ill. When this man heard that Jesus had come from Judea to Galilee, he went to him and asked him repeatedly to come down and heal his son, because he was about to die. Jesus told him, "Unless you people see signs and wonders, you will never believe." The official told him, "Sir, please come down before my little boy dies." And Jesus told him, "Go home, your son will live." The man believed what Jesus told him and started back home. While he was on his way, his servants met him and told him that his child was alive. So he asked them at what hour he had begun to recover, and they told him, "The fever left him yesterday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon." Then the father realized that this was the very hour when Jesus had told him, "Your son will live." So he himself believed, along with his whole family. Now this was the second sign that Jesus did after coming from Judea to Galilee. Later on, there was another festival of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Near the sheep gate in Jerusalem is a pool called Bethsaida in Hebrew. It has 5 colonnades, and under these a large number of sick people were lying, blind, lame, or paralyzed, waiting for the movement of the water. At certain times, an angel of the Lord would go down into the pool and stir up the water, and whoever stepped in first after the stirring of the water was healed of whatever disease he had. One particular man was there who had been ill for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had already been there a long time, he asked him, "Do you want to get well?" The sick man answered him, "Sir, I don't have anyone to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up. While I'm trying to get there, someone else steps down ahead of me." And Jesus told him, "Stand up, pick up your mat, and walk." The man immediately became well, and he picked up his mat and started walking. Now that day was a Sabbath. So the Jews told the man who had been healed, "It is the Sabbath, and it is not lawful for you to carry your mat." But he answered them, "The man who made me well told me, 'Pick up your mat and walk.'" They asked him, "Who is the man who told you, 'Pick it up and walk'?" But the one who had been healed did not know who it was, because Jesus had slipped away from the crowd in that place. Later on, Jesus found him in the temple and told him, "See, you have become well. Stop sinning, or something worse may happen to you." The man went off and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had made him well. So the Jews began persecuting Jesus because he kept doing such things on the Sabbath. But Jesus answered them, "My Father has been working until now, and I too am working." So the Jews were trying all the harder to kill him, because he was not only breaking the Sabbath, but was also calling God his own Father, therefore making himself equal to God. Jesus told them, "Truly I tell all of you with certainty, the Son can do nothing of his own accord, but only what he sees the Father doing. What the Father does, the Son does likewise. The Father loves the Son and shows him everything he is doing, and he will show him even greater actions than these, so that you may be amazed. Just as the Father raises the dead and gives them life, so also the Son gives life to those he chooses. The Father judges no one, but he has given all authority to judge to the Son, so that everyone may honor the Son as they honor the Father. Whoever does not honor the Son does not honor the Father who sent him. Truly I tell all of you with certainty, whoever hears what I say and believes in the one who sent me has eternal life and will not be judged, but has passed from death to life. Truly I tell all of you with certainty, the time approaches and is now here when the dead will hear the voice of the Son of God, and those who hear it will live. Just as the Father has life in himself, so also he has granted the Son to have life in himself. And he has given him authority to judge, because he is the Son of Man. Don't be amazed at this, because the time is approaching when everyone in their graves will hear the Son of Man's voice, and will come out, those who have done what is good to the resurrection that leads to life, and those who have practiced what is evil to the resurrection that ends in condemnation.
Thank you, Stuart. Jenny called.
Oh. Okay. Who would like to start with a comment?
I'm looking at the back of the room and I'm about to point at somebody and tell them to ask something.
Angela, Angela, took
Oh,
her
I am going to ask something. Last week we were looking ahead, and is Ella still with
No, Ella had to leave.
us today? I
Yeah,
haven't heard from Ella, but oh no.
Ella
Now
had to go.
looky there. She dodged out because last week she said she was going to try to work out all this mention of feast and figure out for us what feast is actually going on here. So I was very eager to see what she came up with, but now darn it, she's not here. So what to do now?
I don't know. Let's ask Yvette and see if Yvette knows the answer to your question. I've got some really good students in my class.
Stuart, Chris speaking.
Yes, hello. Hi, Chris.
In light of the newsletter we got from Joseph, actually from Sombra, with his interesting story of the man who was trying to couple together that Yeshua and Jehovah are one and the same person, or the same entity. This is very peculiar to read this story when Jesus is telling, okay, I can only do what the Father is doing, and knowing the fact that he is the Father himself. Yeah, so I just want to mention that.
Thank you, Chris. Yes.
If you give any credence to Michael Rood, it's the Feast of Shavuot.
You mean in this context right here? From John?
Yes. He's saying that Jesus leaves the Galilee and arrives at Jerusalem for the, oh no, sorry. It says above that, Jesus leaves for Shavuot, but then below it, it says Jesus leaves Galilee and arrives at Jerusalem for the Feast of Pentecost. Yeah, Pentecost before the week-long festivities begin.
What verse are you on?
John 5:1.
That would be Shavuot. There's a one-day feast.
Yom Kippur.
Pardon?
Yom Kippur is a one-day feast before the week of festivities.
That's at Sukkot. Before Sukkot.
So, depends on whether you agree with Michael Rood or not.
Okay, so what verse are we talking about?
John 5:1. And then he has a bracket that says, in the King James Version, the Greek text of John was rendered, after this there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. It must first be noted that no one remotely familiar with the Hebrew culture in the first century Israel would ever casually refer to one of the feasts of Yehovah as a feast of the Jews. Yochanan, the Jewish author, would have named the feast, and every Israelite would have known that the only feast that occurs at this time of year is the feast of Shavuot. The Greek translators, however, being completely unfamiliar with the prophetic significance of this feast and having nothing remotely associated to it in their culture, simply classified the divine appointed feast of Shavuot as an insignificant, quote, feast of the Jews. It must further be noted that the British refused to follow their own rules of capitalization. But if you give any respect to Michael Rood, and I don't know if you all do or not, it is in John 5:1, he is saying it was the Feast of Shavuot.
Yes, I agree with that.
And is the Feast of Shavuot the next day? Are we talking about the weekly Sabbath
Ooh,
in John 5?
Let me see. I just closed the book, so let me find the page again.
Is that in his chronological book?
Yes, in the chronological Gospels. Let's see, 5, page 49.
See, before that, it was Passover. And then we see him speaking to the woman at the well before this day. That was last week's.
So he's in John 5:1, he's saying this is week 15, day 99. And he then in John 5:16 through 47 says that period, that time was week 16, day 106, and then he says that it's Shavuot on that day. So if you read John 5:16 through 47, he would say that was the day of Shavuot. John 5:2 through 15 is the week before Shavuot.
Okay, so I'm seeing something. Verse 14 says, afterward, Yeshua found himself in the temple, and he said to him, see that you are well, sin no more. So one of the things about getting the covenant at Mount Sinai, which is what we're celebrating at Shavuot, is that from getting the ketubah to the wedding feast, you are supposed to be practicing not sinning, practicing keeping the ketubah, so that when you come to Yom Kippur, you can be judged and found the pure, spotless bride, so that you can go on to the wedding feast. So is it possible that this picture is in here, sin no more, because it is talking about Shavuot?
Well, so the challenge we have is if we keep going into John 6 talks about the Passover.
Well, when I click the little button that's a linky thingy in my verse 5:1, it refers me from John 5:1 to John 6:4, which is talking about the Passover.
Okay.
So it is possible that he's going up for Passover, because it says, so verse 5:1 says, after this. Okay, so after what? After Jesus heals an official's son. And this is referring back, verse 46 says, he came again to Cana in Galilee, where he had made the water into wine. So that's a reference to a wedding. So
Which was
wedding
at
is
Passover.
Well, no, a wedding's at Sukkot.
It was before Passover. The wedding of Cana,
Looking
right?
at the cycle of things.
Yeah.
Right? If you've been to Sukkot, if you've been to a wedding, then the next thing that comes after a wedding.
Oh, I got you. Yeah.
is the taking of the bride, the Passover, right?
Yeah, I'm just saying that in the order that if this is in order, the wedding at Cana was near the Passover was right after the
But
wedding feast.
verse 46 said, so he came again to Cana in Galilee, where he had made the water into wine. So he was at the wedding, he performed that miracle, then he goes away, and then he ends up coming back through, and we're just remembering back what he did that first time, because now he's about to do another miracle, and this miracle is this healing of the man on the Shabbat. Or healing the official's son is what it says.
See, I know that, was it Linda mentioned Rude? He's going to deny that the next, you said the next chapter was Passover? He's going to deny that.
Yes, 6:4 is Passover.
Yeah, 6:4. It says that the Pesach was near the festival of the Jews. Rude denies that. He says, again, I don't know if you all know, but he's saying his
only 1.5
ministry
years, right?
Right, 70 weeks, he's saying.
Right.
Well,
I know some.
Also, I watched a whole Passover of Nehemiah Gordon, proving to Michael Rood that that John 6:4 was added, and that whole thing. So I think, to be fair, on a certain level, Michael is taking Nehemiah Gordon's word.
Yeah, it could be.
But you know what? They did present him. They went to the British Library and were able to find the manuscripts or whatever they were, that proved the John 6:4 thing. So Michael is taking Nehemiah's proof that he got from the manuscripts. I think it was in England.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, regardless of that, I'm just saying that even if it's Nehemiah, and I'm sure they both were involved in that, but he's saying 70-week ministry, and he's saying, and it was really compelling how he divided it up to show that there were gaps, big, huge gaps, that would not be the case. In reality, you wouldn't all of a sudden for 6 months not hear anything about Yeshua. You hear him do things almost every single day, and then suddenly silence for 6 months. And he, in some of his videos and in that book you're referring to, he explains how he put it together where there were no gaps, and it was a short period. Others also say there was only 2 Passovers that Yeshua was at. And so that was a year, is what he's saying. Some say 70 weeks. I think there are some very famous historians that say about 1.5 years or just over a year. Only a few of the very famous historians say 3.5 years to try to fit the 3.5 years, to make everything fit just right with their 3.5 year thinking. And I also went through it and looked at this, and this one, it just doesn't make sense. If any of this is in chronological order, meaning John within the chapters, you would think it would be in chronological order from 1 through whatever John ends with. And I just find it very hard to believe that it would be just, jumping around. And I don't think that it's the Feast of the Jews. I mean, not the Passover, the Feast of the Jews. Let me read it here. And the Pesach was near the festival of the Jews. Could it be there's a festival of the Jews? Certainly, but what is it? It's not the Pesach. It just went by chapter 4.
Okay, so Could it be the festival of the Jews? There are different
Yeah.
things that the Jews do in their traditions. One of them,
Yes.
one of them is Purim, and following Purim is Passover. So that
Yep.
would be in line.
But now do we know? I don't think there's any mention that Yeshua kept Purim. But
No.
yes, you're right.
Right. And that, but that is what we would call a festival of the Jews, right?
Yes.
There's another festival of the Jews,
Hanukkah.
the grape harvest. I don't know the name of it, but there is a grape harvest festival, and there are often weddings at grape harvests because the people come together. Grape harvest is also another time where you choose your bride, because the communities are getting together, and there's opportunity for the young people to mix and mingle. There's another feast of the Jews, which is the festival of the trees. That's I think that's like the month after Shavuot. There's also the 9th of Av.
Okay.
You know, there are things that we do call the festival of the Jews that are Jewish holidays that are not Levitical holidays, is what I'm trying to get at.
Yep, I agree. Mm-hmm. And in their ignorance, they would have probably said something like this. Yes.
In John 7, we'll be moving into Sukkot.
So if you take 6 and you don't consider it Pesach, I wonder, does 5, after this, there was a festival of the Jews, that's chapter 5, and then it goes to 6, there'd be another Passover? No, see, I think they're talking the same feast. That's what I'm thinking. In 5 and 6. And then, chronologically, you get into the period in the summer where there's not a whole lot, and then you get into the trumpets, atonement, Sukkot, in that order. And you said 7 starts?
Yeah, we've got Sukkot happening in John 7.
Yeah. So if you mindfully remove 6-4, festival of the Pesach, and just leave it as festival of the Jews, I'm thinking that's the same feast that's written in chapter 5, Sukkot. Because it's still, this one in chapter 5 says, after this, there was a feast of the Jews. And they went up to Jerusalem. And then there's a chapter of information. Could be, a day or 2 or 3 or whatever it is. Maybe in the same day. I don't know. And then you jump to 6. And then it says, and then the festival of the Jews. So we could still be talking the same festival or the same, Sukkot. Not Sukkot, Shavuot, Pentecost. So, yeah, again, that's my assumption. If you read this with that right here, it messes up the chronology wickedness. Thank you.
Clear as mud, Angela?
Sombra, I like the logic with which you proceed, rightly picking up on this. There was a feast of the Jews and thinking that perhaps it is Purim. But when we backtrack to chapter 2 and we realize that a Passover has occurred in chapter 2, it does pose some problems there that we would not be, discussing Purim then. So,
okay, but could
I
it be
also
a year later then?
Well, I think in this instance, Michael Rood is absolutely correct to rely on Nehemiah's research and scholarship that verse 4 of chapter 6 is added. And if we do that, then we see that Passovers happen, and now we're at Shavuot. He accomplishes the healing of the man at the pool of Siloam on the Sabbath day, which precedes the feast. You know, they're not going to be traveling on the feast day. So they're getting there. He heals the man on the Sabbath day. The next day is Shavuot. And then, you know, there are first fruit feasts of grapes and oil and wood offerings brought up that leads us up to trumpets. These are all Levitical things that must be done by all of the tribes to bring their first fruits as the harvest are finished. So I think.
Okay, so we're putting Shavuot in there, because if we say that those words, the feast of the Jews is Shavuot, then the very next thing that we see is a Passover. And but you're saying that Passover isn't really supposed to be.
Might not be there.
So is Nehemiah saying that the words Passover in 6:4 shouldn't be Passover, that the words should say something like Feast of the Jews?
The whole verse was added according to Rood's teaching and Nehemiah's findings. The entire verse was added to support a 3.5-year ministry.
It was scribes that were putting parentheses in type thing.
Yeah.
And Nehemiah and Michael went there himself to try and prove it, that he was right, and he came back and thought he was not right. But when Nehemiah did his more in-depth research, and they presented this whole thing at a Passover as a present to Michael Rood, when Nehemiah was able to show through his research that the parts that they had in parentheses, and the word that Michael thought he looked up that proved him wrong was exactly the opposite of what Michael had thought. And Nehemiah was there to tell him that that word that had to do with the scribes was, no, this verse is not usually not accepted. I mean, I may have my words wrong, but so it's more the scribes that are putting their 2 cents in the documents,
right,
through the ages. And I think Nehemiah found two or three witnesses of that these scribes agreed that it was not there.
Right.
But my memory's,
You're pretty close, Linda, because I remember that.
Okay, from my memory's vague because it was quite a few Passovers ago.
Yeah, see, and I've watched the thing with Nehemiah and Michael Rood proving that a verse wasn't in there, but I couldn't, like, without this conversation here today, I certainly wouldn't remember what verse it was.
And a more problematic thing for me, you guys, is this phrasing that John consistently uses, Feast of the Jews. For goodness sake, when did they become Feast of the Jews? They, as far as I know, they're Feast of Hua. So we should have our radars up here. This is this evidence of the state of, Israel at this time, of Judah? Is it what Malachi is saying? That corruption, that this, well, the tone is set in chapter 1 of John. Let me see, where am I at here? Chapter 1 in John, verse 19. And this is the record of John. when the Jews sent priests and Levites from Jerusalem to ask him, "Who art thou?" And then from there on, it's like Feast of the Jews, Feast of the Jews. But they're establishing here that the Jews are like questioning the authority of John the Baptist. They're questioning the authority of Yeshua. And then we get this phrasing, Feast of the Jews, Feast of the Jews. It's like, wait a minute. When did they become Feast of the Jews and not Feast of Yahuwah? And I think that is a more problematic thing, really. I mean, it has become the issue for me, and trying to mine that to a conclusion, I guess. So, yeah, with Nehemiah's scholarship and Michael Root's teaching,
And this is
why
why
manipulation of these scriptures, it's a conundrum.
this is why a lot of people throw the New Testament out. Things like this. And I get it, but it's up to us to determine what is fact and what isn't. As a jury looking at the facts, we can make that conclusion based on the facts. And just like you said, extrapolating the words used and by the author's character, how John writes, how they all different ones write. Also the chronology of the events. There's so many things, and I will tell you, and I think you all know, when you compare all of the four Gospels with regards to the timing of Passover and the naming of Passover and the first day of ULB and so on, there is a lot of contradiction when you look at some of the usage of the chronology in their verses. And it can be very confusing to try to explain it to new people, to try to dispel the errors, because they don't believe that there's errors. They believe it's 100% accurate, like the Torah is in its original wording or in its original language. It's different with the New Testament because we've had the ability for corruption over time, and you can see the destruction of the books from the time Yeshua died right through to about 225 AD, where it was a mass move to destroy anything to do with it so they could erase him from the face of history, leaving a lot of a little history or little writings left to put this together with. So I could see a manipulation, certainly, because we know that's what they tried to do. Hush them up, shut them up. No Sabbath keeper's going to be alive in my watch. Let's get rid of them. They killed millions to try to get them to stop doing their thing. So I can see that. So the part to do is leave it in the side of your thinking, could this be wrong? Yes, and move on and keep that in mind as you read the words. So that's where I'm at with it. And I did read Rude's information. I loved it. I loved what he did with it. I'm not saying I know either way. I still am not sure how long his ministry is. It could be anywhere from 1 year to 3.5 years, like everybody says. But I think I'm looking more at the theme of it all rather than the actual timetable. And at some point, this will be revealed. And I hope so. I'm leaning towards it was a short period. It was the acceptable year of Jehovah. And that's only 1 year, and it was a sabbatical year. Could that be the 1 year? I don't know.
Yeah, I agree.
So,
We just have to ask ourselves, is the state, like the establishment, the condescending language that John uses, the Jews, were discounting John the Baptist. The Jews were questioning the authority of Yeshua. The Feast of the Jews. Is the establishment in Yeshua's time? Is this what Malachi was talking about
I don't think the book of John is written by John the Baptist.
No.
Okay.
I don't either.
Okay.
But John the Apostle records John the Baptist's authority being questioned.
So Tom's been waiting to get.
Okay.
Tom has been waiting for a while. I don't know if Tom, do you want to talk on this?
Oh, yes, I would answer Angela and say yes, yes, and yes. I believe that the establishment had been taken over by the Roman occupation. John talks about Jews who say they are Jews but are not. I'm not saying that all of Jerusalem was fake Jews. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the establishment, and John was being disrespectful. He said the feast of the just like you say, he's talking about the establishment. And you will, and if you take a close read of chapter 8, where he talks of we see these Jews who are following Jesus and questioning him, and John's calling them Jews, and they say that they're descendants of Abraham, and Jesus says, "Yep, you're descendants of Abraham. I know that, but Abraham's not your father." Well, that's because they weren't being taught by Abraham. You know who else was descendants of Abraham that were not in captivity, were never enslaved, right? They say we were never enslaved, chapter 8. Sons of Ishmael, sons of Esau. And to this day, the Jews will tell you Rome was Esau. Rome was Esau. So if you read chapter 8, you read it carefully, you see that, yeah, Abraham's their father. Abraham was Esau's father. Herod was an Edomite. We know this for a fact. Caiaphas, we're told, was a son-in-law of Annas. We're never told what Caiaphas's lineage is. I think John's given us a little clue that Caiaphas was not even an Aaronite. He wasn't even a son of Aaron. But
no,
that's
he wasn't.
my opinion. That's just my opinion. So I would say yes and yes and yes. Yep. He is using that as a derogatory term because they had taken over the temple.
I agree. 100%.
Okay. Thank you. Sean turned on his mic. Did you want to say something, Sean?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Can I go?
Yes.
You know, I like to call verse 24, 5 and 5:24, the other Passover. The other Passover, being Passover from death into life. I mean, that is so wonderful.
Thank you, Sean. Did we lose you?
I don't know why this thing cut out. You hearing me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. The Passover was on the 14th of Aviv, right? And it was a 7th day. And right? So
okay. Did we lose you again, Sean?
If I could, in the absence, Angela, if you have proof about Caiaphas, I'd appreciate hearing it when you get a chance about him not being of Aaron's lineage.
Yeah, doesn't Caiaphas come from the lineage of the people after the Maccabees?
Hold on. I've got it written down here, you guys.
John the Baptist is the high priest. Because I believe that for a long time, but no proof.
Pardon me? I didn't hear that.
I believed that for a long time
Okay.
without having any actual proof.
Okay, some of my proof comes from rabbinical writings like stories of the fathers. They're Sombra, I'm so ashamed to try to pronounce things in Hebrew in front of you because your language talent is so beautiful. I wish I had it. But I'm just
Pirkei
gonna
Avot?
push this Pirkei Avot. That's it. Yeah. So it's like the sayings of the fathers, some background information. This is so what I have is that Shimon Zadik was like one of the last vetted Zadok priest, right? And he had a student, Antigoras of Soho. This comes from Perkia of Sombra.
Avot.
You say it.
Pirkei
There you
Avot.
go.
Yep.
Pirkei Avot, and it's in 1 through 3. He received the Torah. He had oral teaching from Shimon Zadik. But this Antigonus was not a priest. He was just a student. And from him came 2 schools of thought, okay? The Boethusians and the Sadducees, okay? The Boethusians were a religious sect. The Sadducees, we know, are going to become illegitimate priests, okay? They're not from Aaron's line. Ananias was a Boethusian, okay, the teachings come down from Shimon Zadik through Antigonus, and then these 2 houses, the Boethusians and the Sadducees, break off from that. Ananias basically had no Aaronic rights to being a high priest. And from Ananias, Caiaphas is the son-in-law to Ananias. And like I said, I'm getting this from what Sombra said.
Pirkei Avot.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Also, I'll put in that the stones cry out, part 1, at the early parts of it. That Joe has from about page 29 on, also confirms what Angela's saying.
Well, thank you, Linda.
I'm back.
I hate it. The best 8 hours of my day are in public school. I wish I could just do nothing but this and just study and unpack things, but there you go.
Well, shall we close up our session today? We can do some more chatting after. Let's close up our recording and our session.
Can I add one thing? I'm
Yes.
sorry.
Could I add one? Oh,
I sort of jumped in here at last.
Brian, go first. Yes.
Yeah, I don't know if you discussed it or not. I just trying to figure out where you were at. I see you're discussing John 4 through 529, 443 to 529. I don't know if you discussed this or not, but chapter 5, verse 5, where it says, now a certain man was there who had been in infirmity 38 years. The 38 years, it's a understanding that 38 means to be enslaved. So just to add further dimension to this infirmity involved being enslaved to the sin that he was under. And it was a parallel understanding of what the number 38 means. And just thought I'd add that before you left. If that's anything.
Thank you, Brian.
All right.
Okay, good. And Sean, did you want to say something as well?
Yes, I got cut off. I got disconnected from the internet. So, um, I was saying, I like to call 524 the other Passover, right? Being Passover from death into life. The Passover was always on the 14th of Aviv, right? So that would be in like the second cycle in 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 the charts. On the first cycle was creation, where God rested on the seventh day, and man should have taken the tree of life, should have eaten the tree of life, and thereby entering to God's rest. But we know he didn't. Instead, he chose and he ate from the other tree, tree of knowledge. So you could see that Passover there where 424 is talking about being passed from one tree to the other tree, Passover from death, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, to life, the tree of life. So I looked at it that way, that in the second seven, right, it wasn't a Sabbath at that time, but it's a seventh at the end of the thing, where you will have the 14th, where there's where we get the 14th, right? The 14th of the second seventh, where man is like, if God bringing back man again to take of this tree of life, the unleavened bread. Remember, they had to eat the unleavened bread. It began, or there's where they began to eat the unleavened bread. This the second seven is as if he was saying, take the tree of life. But the unleavened bread signifies the tree of life, while the leaven signifies the tree of knowledge, right? The tree of knowledge pops up, knowledge pops up. So, and we know that leaven's a whole lumper, right? So that's where we're seeing in John 5:24, they're passing from one tree to the other tree. And that's so wonderful. And when I looked at the charts and looking into the charts and seeing the numbers, right? The 14th, then the feast of the unleavened bread was now from the 15th. So there's another 7 now, from the 15th to the 21st, right? The 15th being another Sabbath. The 21st is another Sabbath, or another high day, or if you want to call it that, right?
Mhm.
So they had, again, it's as if God is telling them, well, remember they got put out of, after Adam's sin, they got covered and they were put out of the garden. And the same thing you're seeing, they got put out of Egypt. And if you look at it, there's some similarities between the two. And you get another 7 journey, beginning with unleavened bread again on the first day, the 15th. It's as if he's saying again, eat the tree of unleavened bread, right? And then it ends with the 21st, again with unleavened bread. You had a whole journey of unleavened bread of going through from things. I mean, we know that the next 7 years is ending in a millennium as such. So the journey was through the 6 days, because we know the 6 days where man ends, right? According to the jubilee of the 120 jubilee years. So you had 6 days of unleavened bread. Is that the Lord is always saying, keep eating the tree of life, keep eating that tree. So that's what I like to add and close off this portion with. So I just praise the Lord that He has passed us out from death, from the tree of knowledge, into, and I like the Greek preposition there in 5:24, into life, into the tree of life, right? There where we could take Him in and enjoy Him and enter Him into His rest, right? So praise the Lord, hallelujah.
That's brilliant, Sean. Have you got that written out at all?
No, that's out in my head. I was reasoning. You know what I did? After I went back to, remember last I went back to Psalms 119, because I want to know how come he's ending on a negative, right? He's going astray. And he had the precepts, the statutes, the ordinances, commandments, law. He had it all. But yet he's longing for salvation. And it's like, when I compare now with the other psalms, this other psalms now are psalms are is going up, they're ascending. So it's like if it's to me it's like if the Red Sea is in between those two sets of Psalms. He's ending going down and then coming through, and then coming up, ascending, going through the Red Sea and coming up into the ascent of the other end of the Psalm, right? And coming up into the ascent. And the first, that 120 begins in a distress. So he's going through the distress, through the Red Sea, and coming up into ascent, coming up into resurrection. There was 3 days, they journeyed for 3 days, it said, right? After 3 days, we know is resurrection, is life. So I was starting to turn all these things through my head. And the number, because here what I did, 2 years ago, now remember I came from the background of Christianity, right? And we had Friday being, well, we used to call it Good Friday. I don't know why we call it Good Friday, but anyhow, that was what I came out. And then I came to using the calendars. Well, don't beat me up on this, but where we came to a Wednesday, where Aviv 14th is a Wednesday. So 2 years ago in 2023, the Aviv 14th fell on a Wednesday. And that was significant. I was like, wow. And I told my daughter, what? We had a bread maker. I told her, don't put peas in the bread that day. Because we had a small meeting we used to go to on Wednesday evening. So I said, I'm going to take this bread. And just to show them, because I'm trying to get these people to think of not about Easter and think about Passover and going back. And it's that verse in 6:4, the Passovers of the Jews. That's one that I said, well, hey, Passovers of the Jews. Then I need to go back to the Jews and see how they practice this, how what they did and how they do it and so. All along, so we tried to took the bread and they actually ate it. It was wet,
I would love,
anyhow.
Sean,
So
I
I'm
would
looking
love
at
for you
this,
to
all the
write that.
Psalms going through the Red Sea coming out, and I'm thinking, and the salvation of the man there, the woman at the well.
Yep.
So, you know that we do these little vignette teachings. I think you need to write that out and turn it into one of these little vignette teachings and present that.
Oh, I do a lot of writings.
Yeah.
I do a lot of writings. Yeah.
But I think you need to do that and present that here again, because that was brilliant.
Yeah, I agree.
And
Sean, I agree. Put it on
Yeah.
paper and get it over to Shamber, and she will get it out to us again. And
yeah,
it's a hard communication, Sean, with your system, a little bit with your accent, not knocking it out, but there's something here. I just can't get it all from what you're saying. I'd love to see it on writing, and then I would get it. You know what I'm saying? I get some of it, but I just miss some of it too.
Yeah, I'd love to see that in writing, and then I'd love to see you write it out and then present it. So like we'd give you the share screen and you could present your slides, and then we'd take what you've written and put it in the newsletter, because I think what you just said was brilliant.
All right, you could send me your email.
Okay.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Or send it to the admin email. Which one?
Okay. Very good. Very good. Well, let's close this off. Shane, could you close the Torah for us?
Yes, I can. Sorry for the background noise. Somebody decided to start printing something.
No worries.
All right, as we close the Torah, we say this prayer. V'zod ha-Torah asher sam Moshe lifnei b'nei Yisrael pi Yehovah biyad Moshe. And this is the Torah that Moses placed before the children of Israel at the command of Yehovah to the hand of Moses. Returning the Torah to the ark, we say this, it's a tree of life prayer. Etzayim hi lemakizim kimba v'tomeka meushar derakeha darkei noam v'kol nativoteka shalom. Ashivenu Yahovah ele kavana shuva Hadesh Hadesh Yameinu, Hadesh Yameinu, Kekedem. A tree of life to those who hold fast to it, and all who cling to it find happiness. Its ways are ways of pleasantness, and all its paths are peace. Help us and guide us, inspire us, and provide us with the wisdom your Torah can show. Cause us to learn, renew, and return, just as in the days of old.
Amen. Thank you, Shane. And Ryan, would you close us out in prayer, please?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, we can.
All right. All right. Father God, creator of heaven and earth, king of the universe, thank you for this Sabbath, the 5th Sabbath of our Omer count. We can't wait to see what you hold for us in 2 more Sabbaths. Father, we ask that for your protection upon us, watch over us throughout this coming week, be a protection upon Joe and watch over his journeys and help to spread your word, Father. For we love and praise you and thank you for your teaching, and just continue to be with us and lead us in your ways, Father. Forgive us where we fall short of your glory, and just help us to keep your commands, statutes, and ordinances, and to walk in your ways. We love and praise you and thank you for this time. In the name of Yeshua, we give you all praise, honor, and glory. And amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Ryan. Okay. Well, those of you who are watching this on video, we invite you to come join us live on Saturdays at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Savings Time in North America. Coordinates are in our weekly newsletter, so please subscribe at sightedmoon.com. Shalom and Shavua Tov, everyone. May you be blessed with a good week, a week of peace. May gladness reign and joy increase. Shalom. Somebody needs to press stop recording. Who's got